Hello everyone! Are we live? Feel free to write something in the chat to let me know that everything is working, that the audio isn't horrible or anything like that. The rain is currently pouring down outside, but I don't think that's going to be a big issue, but we will see how that goes throughout the stream. So how are you all doing today on this wonderful Saturday? Audio is good, that is some nice confirmation to see in the chat. There's one final thing that I will try to fix now right before getting into all of the vivarium reviews. So you will have to sit back for a minute while waiting for me to see if it is possible to get this to work. The issue I'm having, which is an issue I've had for pretty much every single stream that I've made, is that the chat box... Oh! The chat box is working! You can see the chat messages in the video itself, not just in the chat replay. Then perfect. That is great. I don't know why you can only see one of them though. I think that's because I failed to activate it before it. If you just want to spam the chat a little bit, not too much, but send a few messages just so I can see that this thing in the corner here is going to work, because I can only see the latest chat message. Yeah, okay, it seems to be working, so that's great, I suppose. So welcome to the stream, everybody. I hope you're having a good day. Today we're going to take a look at some vivariums, which I suppose many of those watching are also the same people who have sent in their vivariums that I'm going to look at today. But perhaps there might also be some lurkers who just want to watch a few other enclosures and see what I have to say about them. But regardless, I am happy that you're all here. I didn't have it on full screen, but it's time for the vivarium review, and you can see that this is just a Google slideshow that I have prepared. I have one major upgrade since the last vivarium review live stream that I've made, which is a major improvement, and that is the fact that I'm only allowing one single image from every participant, or from every participant, which has saved me a lot of time in preparing this live stream, and also a lot of confusion and hesitation while doing the live stream itself. I suppose I haven't done the live stream yet, we're obviously just starting out, but I think that's going to be an improvement, because when I allowed up to 3 images, then pretty much everyone sent 3 images, and it was starting to become a bit difficult to handle. Just a complete side note before we get started, I can also mention the fact that there is one little difference in the background of, well, my own video feed. So let me know if any of you can spot that and see what has changed. Actually 2 differences from how my animal room used to look. It's not very big things, but it's something slightly interesting. But we will get into the vivarium reviews right now. There's nothing further to do, as we say. And a lot of these were submitted like 2 or 3 weeks ago, so hopefully the people who submitted them haven't like forgotten about my existence or something. That was because this stream was delayed, as you most likely know if you're watching this by now. But anyways, this is the first one, and I will also try to see if I can just find the message that each person has sent me, so we can hear what they have to say to the stream and get some context behind their vivariums. So this first one came from somebody who mainly keeps tarantulas and scorpions, but always had a soft spot for dart frogs. I will see if there's anything in particular that I will read out about this one. And this person also mentioned how they usually keep tarantulas and scorpions, but they aren't really optimal for creating beautiful vivariums. I have tried my best behind me, but these vivariums definitely are not on par with any of my dart frog tanks. and that is pretty much the same thing that this person is trying to say. But so this is their first like proper bioactive vivarium that is a bigger thing, and it currently doesn't house any dart frog or dart frogs, but they are considering adding some Epipodobetes anthonii. So that was a brief summary of the description that I got from this person. And they also mentioned that they chose rather, what can you say, safe or basic plant options without getting to something too overly fancy, if you want to put it like that. So this is, it's a style that works perfectly well for planting new vivariums, and I have been trying to focus while also doing different things on my monitor. I will try to focus on my speaking a bit better now. But so, what do we have to say about this one? You can of course feel free to write your own rankings of these vivariums too in the chat, so we can see if you and I agree. But basically I will give them a score between 1 and 10, and kind of half the points that you can get will be just for the animal suitability or utility, while the other half of the points will be for aesthetic purposes. And this is a rather simple setup. It doesn't have a 3D background, it has a rather simple one, and it has some pretty basic plant choices. But I will definitely say that I think it definitely serves the purpose that it's supposed to serve. Obviously, any dart frog, anyone who's into dart frogs will notice the lack of leaf litter, but the important detail here is that, it doesn't house frogs yet, and when it doesn't, I won't really hold that against somebody, because I personally also tend to add leaf litter a lot later, once the tank is slightly more grown in, but still before adding frogs. So assuming that this person will do that as well, that's not something I'm going to hold against them. I have moved my face cam around just so you can see the full enclosure. But yeah, I mean, while it's nothing super spectacular with a major 3D background and completely outstanding plant choices, I will still have to say that it's a really solid tank. You can see that the frogs will have a lot of coverage where they can feel safe and secure, and I'm sure that a group of Epipodobetes anthonii would definitely enjoy this setup. So what do we start on? What will be the first rating of the stream? I think something like a 6 out of 10 is a good start. There is nothing to complain about from the animal's perspective. Obviously, once the plants have grown in a bit more, the upper half of the tank will be utilized more, simply once these plants have grown. If there was a more mixed plant selection, like both delicate, tiny, beautiful orchids and this Tradescantia to the left, I would probably criticize it. The fact that there's like one really fast growing plant that will take over. But given that this is a more simplistic setup where it's basically just plants that are going to completely take over the setup eventually, then I don't really think that's something I would like to comment on, because this is a completely different style where it's basically intended that all the plants will take over everything, since there isn't really that much of scape and background to talk about. So I think the plant choices work well. You will have to trim the Tradescantia a lot once it's grown in, but that kind of goes for all the plants in this setup. Maybe not the orchid to the right, but still, you get my point. Assuming that you will add leaf litter before adding frogs, I think a 6 out of 10 is a good starting point, and yeah, good job. So the next setup we have here is this one. This is the Exoterra large tall, I don't know what they are marketing their enclosures at, as it's 90 by 45 by 60 or 36 by 18 by 24 inches. And I will see what they wrote. They didn't write anything besides the fact that it houses Dendrobates leucomelas. So this one is quite a bit bigger than the previous one, but you can actually notice that this is a much more open setup, and it does have a background which has had a bit more time put into it. It's not really overgrown with any big plants just yet, but it's hopefully going to be in the near future once they eventually take off. The first thing that I noticed when I watched this setup is the fact that there is a lot of dead and rehydrated moss all over the floor, and this is generally considered to be an outdated practice nowadays, which is not recommended for dart frog vivariums, not only because of the fact that they will be sitting in like a moist and mushy swamp essentially, or well, that's the main reason. Also, once it breaks down, it will release a bunch of it's basically going to become like the perfect breeding ground for bacteria, and it's not really something that we recommend. It used to be a big thing that people would do back in the day, where they hadn't really figured out that screen mesh tops are a bad idea, and the fact that and back when every light source produced a lot more spill heat, so the enclosure would dry up very quickly. But now we simply have much better ways of maintaining humidity than having this sphagnum layer on the floor. So I would highly recommend taking out the sphagnum and replacing it with a big layer of leaf litter. And if there is a screen mesh top, which isn't impossible, then I would look into changing that, but I'm not sure about that. That could be a reason that you may have added sphagnum moss, but that is, it would be easier to fix this through other means, we could say. But so this is obviously a bigger setup, and bigger is always better, so that's certainly a big plus. But I will also definitely stand by that I would recommend taking out the sphagnum and replacing it with leaf litter. I'm also not sure what substrate is beneath the sphagnum. It might be something like cocoa fiber or something like that, which is not always the best idea in the long run in a humid setup. Yeah, especially the moss on top of the substrate, possibly the substrate itself, but I cannot really confidently say anything about that. Those are the first things that I notice. I think the plant choices are interesting. There are a few which I might not have done. I'm assuming that this is, I don't know what it's called in English. We call it murgröna in Swedish. It's, I have to translate this. Murgröna English. Ivy, okay. Yeah, I think this is an ivy plant, I would assume. And I generally don't think they are the most suitable plants for a dart frog enclosure in terms of like the environment that you have in the tank. And I think from the limited amount of knowledge I have on them that they won't really do too well in the long run. But you can see how that develops over time. I would definitely consider getting some more, what can you say, more conventional in the dart frog hobby plants to cover the background, like some ficus perhaps, or more Marcravias if you want something really slowly growing. But yeah, so the plant choices do feel a bit off, and also these, I think they're called parlor palms, if I remember correctly, though I'm not entirely sure. They tend to be like a bit weird in vivarium settings, like either they die or they grow really big and become an issue, but it's not like it's going to be dangerous to the frogs or anything. It's just a plant that I personally wouldn't have. But I think, given the fact that this is a large tank and it has, you know, a custom-made background and all of that, I think we're going to give it like 5.5, and that is when taking into account that it does lose a few points for the layer of dead moss and a lack of leaf litter. If that was changed, I think it would be slightly higher. But good job on your first setup. So it's time to get to the next one, and I will see what they have written. And feel free to also ask any follow-up questions about the setups or comments, or if I'm reviewing your setup while you're watching the stream, feel free to also say something about that, or enlighten me whenever I have any uncertain comments, or spam your own ratings of the tanks shown on the screen, because a live stream is a lot easier if you help me, we could say. But here's the next submission, and this one houses 5 Dendrobates auratus Highland Bronze, which is one of the most beautiful auratus in my opinion, for sure. And I also think that this is a really beautiful tank, which is set up in quite an interesting way, with the cork bark background on 2 of the sides and a bit of hygrolon in between. I have to say that I kind of like it when you have it this way. It's sort of similar to my big tank, which has like a large 3D element to the left and to the right, while also having some flat hygrolon in the middle. I think having hygrolon, maybe there is some like foam behind this hygrolon, I'm not sure, but I think it really makes sense to have hygrolon flat against the wall, if you ask me personally. I see a question in the chat. Will we be able to watch this back as well? Yes, you will. The entire VOD of the live stream is going to be available on the channel. It's not going to be uploaded as a video in like an edited form, but if you go on the live tab on my channel, you can find all of my past live streams there, if you're curious about that. I will also just see if this person wrote something for me. Yeah, they didn't really mention any details besides the size. This one is the same size as the previous one, so 90 by 45 by 60 centimeters. And they mentioned that it's been running for about 7 months now, and I'm planning on adding some smaller leaved plants in the future to reduce the bigger leaved plants. I think that would be an improvement that makes sense, because this enclosure doesn't really look too massive, especially not when you have this pretty large and like, what can you say, healthy looking golden pothos here, and some really big whatever this spiky begonia in the middle is. Like if you had more smaller leaves, I think this enclosure would look a lot bigger. Like imagine having some, I don't know if I would want a ficus in here, since they grow a bit too quickly, like in a not so in a tank which isn't scaped in a too complicated way. I think it's totally fine to have, some ficus in there that will take over everything and give you some fast results. But if you have a too nice hardscape background, you might want to avoid that. So I'm not sure what I would think about this one. Maybe I wouldn't put the fastest growing ficus, but still, like a well-tuned ficus probably would be a good addition to this tank. I think something really slow like Marcravias aren't really going to compete with all of these fast-growing plants that you have. Yeah, I think that what was I going to say? I think this is a really pretty setup. The only like criticism I have on it is purely the aesthetic side of it, and that is that it does feel kind of cluttered with all of these big leaves in the middle of like various colors and shapes. It feels a little bit assorted, if you get my point. So I can't really say that it's the prettiest looking setup in my opinion, but I think the background and hardscape is really well done, and that is of course the most important thing to get right, considering that it's very easy to trim down and replace a plant, but it's not going to be easy to rip out a bad looking background and replace it. But for frog utility, I'm sure that the sometimes a bit shy auratus, of course that varies a lot between individuals, but I'm sure that the auratus are going to enjoy the fact that there is a lot of plant coverage in here. So in that regard, I think this is a really good example of what to do. But perhaps I would, especially here in the middle, like this begonia, I think I would prefer to open up some space and get some more smaller leaves, as this person also mentioned in the email. But I think this is really well done still. I think like an 8 out of 10, maybe 7.5 would be a good score. I think a 7.5, and it's like the only thing holding it back really for me is like the plant choices, which there's nothing wrong from the frog's perspective. It's just like it has a few plants that I personally don't really like too much, and of course I am very biased because this is my own live stream and I say whatever I want on it. Yeah, 7.5 I think is a good score for this one, and from the animals perspective there's nothing to complain about at all. It all looks good for them, so great job. I also saw a comment in the chat regarding the plant on the previous submission, the ivy, about them preferring colder temperatures, and that sounds very aligned with what I have read about them, so that definitely makes sense. But now it's time for the next one, and that one is this enclosure, which houses a 6-year-old corn snake. I think this person commented on a video or on the initial post when I was looking for submissions for this live stream, and said something along the lines of like, is it fine to submit my corn snake enclosure because I don't have any dart frogs? And my response was yes, but I won't be able to say much. So here we are, and I'm not able to say too much. I can of course judge it from an aesthetic point of view, and perhaps some like basics, you know, enclosure sizes or whatever, but I'm not a corn snake keeper at all, so keep that in mind. I cannot really judge the way that it escaped to match their environment, but overall, like, it looks good. Obviously a corn snake enclosure is almost never going to be as pretty as some of the better dart frog enclosures that we can see here. You know, you simply have a much more limited plant choice. You need bigger and more bulletproof plants and so on. So I don't think that unless someone came here with like a really beautiful enclosure, super well scaped with a fancy background or whatever, unless that happened, I don't think a corn snake tank would be like fighting for the highest scores in one of my review live streams. But it looks solid. I cannot really say anything immediate to complain about. Regarding the enclosure size, I'm definitely not an expert on corn snakes. I think within the Swedish hobby the standard would be to have something slightly bigger for an adult corn snake. I don't know exactly what the current regulations say about that, but I think this is like on the smaller end. But if you compare it to the American husbandry standard, this is certainly quite big, because most people would keep them in like a shoebox or something. Yes, Joshua, you can submit other terrariums other than dart frogs if you feel like it, but keep in mind that my commentary is going to be possibly a bit less interesting unless you submit like tarantula enclosures or something. There are quite a few crested gecko tanks that are going to turn up in this live stream actually, which I do keep a crested gecko and have kept two in the past, so I guess I have something to say about those as well. But you can submit anything. I have even reviewed like an aquarium, I believe, in a previous rendition of this live stream concept. But yeah, if you compare this to like the American husbandry standard, of course not every like American snake keeper keeps their animals in tiny enclosures, but compared to that, this is a paradise. And here I think people would prefer something slightly bigger, but so I'm not really going to hold that against you or anything like that. But yeah, it looks good, it looks solid, nothing super spectacular, but also better than the majority of corn snake enclosures I've seen. So are we giving this 6.5 out of 10 or something? Simply because a corn snake tank is always going to have slightly less interesting planting and so on than other animals like our dart frogs and so on. Yeah, 6.5 sounds good. And time to move on to the next one. I think I had 26 enclosures submitted in advance, and you can of course also I don't know what happened to the chat on screen, why a bunch of chat messages were shown. Like all of them were shown again. I guess my like chat box restarted or something. Anyways, that was just a side note. But yeah, you can submit more enclosures during the live stream as well, and at some point I will take like a short break and add the ones that have been submitted during the stream. But I had 26 sent in advance. Anyways, this next one houses 3 Phyllobates bicolor, and I will try to find the message about this one as well. Okay, the message doesn't say anything besides that this is their first vivarium, congratulations and welcome to the hobby, and that they plan on adding a coconut. I assume they mean a coconut hut, not just like a full coconut lying there. So this one is somebody who took a bit of an easier approach, which is totally fine. You absolutely don't have to go completely overboard with a custom-made background if you just have plants that grow quickly. I did actually get multiple pictures from this guy, and I only included one out of the pictures in the presentation. But I also got a picture from when it was freshly planted, and there is a major difference between the two pictures. As you can imagine, like vivariums grow in over time. Obviously, that's not something too surprising, but still, I will definitely say that the main thing that I'm noticing about this tank is, of course, that the entire upper half is definitely on the empty side, and I would love to get some big branch that would fill up a bit more height. Maybe if you took something like a cork bark branch, which is slightly bent, and you were able to like lean it against the background, kind of like this one, but get something that's like twice as thick and goes way higher, like all the way up to the tank. Because in this current state, you could basically cut the height in half and it wouldn't matter for the frogs at all. Like if you move this bromeliad slightly down and this one, then it wouldn't make any difference if you just remove the entire upper half. So there is a lot more potential to this setup. But so if you simply add more hardscape, because I think this enclosure would need like 2 more big hardscape pieces, like branches. Corkbark tubes are amazing for this purpose. Like 2 more corkbark tubes or something along those lines. And simply give the plants a bit more time. I think it could look really good and have a lot more plant coverage for the frogs to enjoy. But right now it's very bare in the upper half. Then you have also chosen a rather bold frog species, Phyllobates bicolor, which tends to not really like care too much, which is great. Not only do you get to enjoy a bold and outgoing frog as a first frog, but also if you kept something like maybe Phyllobates vitarus or especially like a Ranitomea in here, I think the layout would be so open that they wouldn't be brave enough to sit out in the open. It's kind of like the more hiding places you give, the more you will see your animals. But in this case, not like specific hiding places like a single coconut hut, but rather like things that utilize the space of the enclosure, if you get what I mean. But given that you have a rather bold species, I think there's not going to be like a super big difference from that, but there is a lot more potential. I think 2 more corkbark branches or corkbark tubes or some other big hardscape pieces to get more height in, and also there aren't really too many plants that will cover the upper half of the enclosure with leaves. Like of course you have the Philodendron verrucosum, which is going to get like a few more leaves and then have to be trimmed down. And there is this like tiny Philodendron brantianum, but there's not really anything that will like go up in a bunch of vines all over the background. Like let's say you had like a Tradescantia in here. I'm not suggesting that because I think they grow way too quickly, but if you did, and it or maybe like Ficus sagittata, which is almost as bad, but not really. and that one just climbed up against the entire background, then it might be a bit more efficient to like cover the upper half in plants rather than, you know, fancy background or whatever. But in this case, there are very few plants that will like grow upwards and fill out the empty volume of the tank. So for that reason, yeah, a few more hardscape pieces and possibly more climbing plants that will go upwards simply. And I think if you add that, you will be good. So for now, I think a 6 out of 10 is a suitable score. Let me know in the chat if you agree with my rankings, or if there's one that you would put higher or lower. But like, it looks good. There's nothing too major to complain about for the frogs, but also there is way more potential with the upper half because it's very bare at the moment. So good job, welcome to the hobby. And Casual Chaos, welcome to the stream. So time for the next submission. How long have we been live? We have been live for about 30 minutes and possibly some technical difficulties in the beginning. So at this pace, how long is the stream going to be? I have no idea. We will find that out. Alireza Abasi, welcome to the stream as well. So this is the next submission, and as you can see here, I will have to move my face cam, or I might just disable it completely. Wait, how do I even do that? I have no idea how to disable my face cam, because I have an idea of how it should be done, but I cannot see. Oh, here I have it. Okay, just so you can read all of the text here. I might re-enable it soon. But this is an interesting submission because this person sent in the same vivarium during the last live stream, and it did look quite different back then. I haven't gone back and like looked at what score I gave it and so on, but the main difference is the fact that back then all of the leaves were like within 20 centimeters of the bottom part of the tank, plus like maybe this, of course this anthurium in the back kind of stuck out a bit more, but well, you get my point. So it was really like centered on the ground and not really much that used any height, if you get what I mean. Now this like big clay patch or whatever this is has been added to the background, which is quite interesting. And there's also this plant, which seems to be a climbing plant that has gone rounds all over this background. I do find it very interesting how there's a background in like this middle portion of the tank, but not the entire thing. But also something that is relevant for how we're going to judge this tank is the fact that it doesn't house any animals. It's just plant experiments / propagation. So I can also assume that this background might also be an experiment, and that's the reason why this person didn't want to put the background in the entire enclosure, of course. So that is reasonable, I think. But yeah, right now I think the setup looks a bit cluttery, but it definitely also has, you know, more growing in to do. Once this climbing plant, I cannot recognize what plant species this is, but once it possibly like covers everything a bit more, that might be something that will improve the rating of this tank. I see a comment, background is silicone and sand, it works but is a mess. I can imagine that it is a mess, and I also don't. How well does it work in a rainforest setup? I mean, it makes a lot of sense to have silicone and sand in a desert setup, but I feel like there's nothing that will like suck up any moisture or whatever in it, which is so But maybe this isn't like a full-on rainforest display. Maybe this is supposed to be like slightly lower. And we also have a plant species in the chat, Passiflora cerulata. I might have to look that one up. I will see where that is coming from. But yeah, so this one is of course difficult to judge. Like it doesn't house any animals, so you cannot complain about the animal utility. It's not like the most stunning looking setup at the moment. It does feel a little bit cluttery, so I'm not going to give it a like too high of a score, but still a solid setup. And I mean, once it's spore grown in, you could totally consider adding some frogs in the future, especially now that the height is not like completely empty. It's a bit more utilized. But what do we give this one? I have been handing out a lot of sixes today. I don't know if I'm getting more harsh on the way that I judge these tanks. It would be interesting to compare this to like my first vivarium review live stream and see if the ratings really are comparable between episodes. I have no idea. But you say it's an experiment, but you think you're reaching a dead point. Yeah, I mean, I kind of see what you mean. In some weird way, like, I cannot see too much potential, like, this plant is going to grow there, this plant's going to grow there, and once that happens, it's going to look, like, insanely beautiful. I don't see that in front of me, but that's just based on, like, my gut feeling. There's no science behind it, and I can't really put my hands on, or put my thoughts on exactly what I mean when I say that, but maybe you get my point. Like, I don't see the image in front of me when this one, like in many freshly planted tanks, it's like you can see all of the plants are, you know, tiny cuttings, and but you can still see the vision, and I can kind of see the vision, but with this like background only covering a tiny part, and the plant selection, you get what I mean. Didn't mean to sound too harsh when saying that. It was a bit weirdly worded, but yeah, I think we could give this one a solid 7 out of 10. Like, it's a nice experimental setup, and well, for the animals there's nothing to complain about because there are no animals, and yeah, it's still, you know, a nice piece of greenery in your room, for sure. So yeah, let's give it a 7 out of 10 for now, and let's move on to the next one. I think there are some chat messages I haven't read as well. Casual Chaos says you will be starting your first bioactive in the next few months, so good luck on that. I'm sure it's going to be a very fun journey, and I appreciate you enjoying and appreciating my Discord, which is great. For those of you watching, if you aren't already in the Discord, you can feel free to join there. I was really active in the beginning, and then I have kind of fallen off on checking it, but I will try to become a bit more active there as well, because I will read like every message, but there is also a very nice community of other people who will read every message. But yeah, and welcome to the stream, GBE, as well, or GB. I don't know how you pronounce that name. Anyways, I think we're good to check out the next setup, and this one is an interesting one. This one houses Ranitomea syrensis quimpicari, and it's some, I think it's an IKEA, like, what do you say, a conversion. I think that's the name people usually do. And it's 5 feet tall, so that is quite tall for sure. I'm sure the frogs are really enjoying it. It says this tank has a full misting system, 3 different fans, and the bottom corner has a drainage section. Oh yeah, you can see the little water feature here. Basically, it's not really a water feature, but rather a small exposed portion of the drainage layer, which is something that I've seen in a lot of people's tanks, and I know a lot of people prefer it. I have kind of opted for different versions, but it's still something that makes sense if you get what I mean. So where was I? Yeah, you said that you were open to criticism on the tank, but honestly I don't think I have that much. Oh, oops, that was not what I meant to do. I'm not sure how, like, I'm curious about how the opening mechanism works. Like, is there a small space between these glass panels which could be an issue when you keep frogs in there? It's just something that I have like asked myself when I have seen these setups. But that's like a really small thing. Besides that, I think this looks like a really, what can you say, professional and complete Dartrog setup, if you get what I mean. Like there's nothing that sticks out to me as like weird. I don't know if you get what I mean when I say that. Like there's a nice background. The usage of all dimensions of the tank really makes sense to me. It's not like the ground is cluttered and the upper half is empty, but it's like a nice distribution of plants, nice distribution of greenery throughout the whole thing. Like there could be more large leaves up here, but it also obviously makes sense that there isn't. So yeah, I don't really have much to complain about here. Like you can always add more plants, but it's not really necessary to have your plants being completely cluttered, if you get my point. I see a question about clay being a viable background. I think it kind of is if you can put it up in like a stable way, which isn't always a given, but still. Yeah, I also see a comment on this one. Wonder if you could get more coverage at the top to give a dark forest floor look. I get what you're trying to say, because that's what I say about pretty much every single setup that I review on these live streams. But at the same time, it feels like there is a lot... like not everything down here is completely pitch black, and I think from an aesthetic viewpoint that's quite a nice thing. But still, like, it feels like half the ground level is still covered in shadows, as I constantly go on and on about in these live streams, because that is, you know, the best way to escape an enclosure for Dartrogs, and especially for like semi-shy species. Why do I keep doing that? I keep scrolling on my mouse pad, which is a bad idea. But yeah, there is like a nice combination of shadows and non-shadowy parts in a way, so I'm sure that the frogs are enjoying this setup for sure. With Ranit Mayas, it's always a bit of a gamble whether you get like bold or shy ones, especially with like Sirensis. There are some species that are kind of more likely to be bold, but with Sirensis it's not always a given, but I can imagine that they are really happy in this enclosure. And I see a chat message about this looking like a portal to the forest, and I totally agree. I think this is going to be a very high score. Like the plant choices are nothing too spectacular besides these really nice looking anthuriums, but besides that it's like there's ficus here even, and like Peleonia and stuff like that. This is some nice philodendron. I would have guessed like Philodendron Plowmania if it wasn't for the fact that it's climbing, because those aren't climbing, those are crawling, so I guess this is like a Mame or something. But like, despite the fact that the plant choices aren't like super spectacular and there are a lot of common plants, I still think this is a very well executed setup. And I cannot think of a single thing to criticize on this one. So I think we're giving this one a 9 out of 10 for sure. Maybe we should do a reach and give it a 9.5. I don't think it's quite a 10. It feels a bit too... yeah, I don't know. I think a 9 is good for this one. I see a good comment from Gibby Shrimp. Don't forget to hit the like button. 9 likes and 30 plus people watching. Yes, if everybody watching would press the like button, and I guess subscribe if you haven't already, but I would almost assume that most people finding this live stream are subscribed. But feel free to do that if you want to. I certainly wouldn't complain. I think it's also possible for you to give me money in the chat. I think I have activated that, but you really don't have to, unless you have a very large excess of money. Then I certainly wouldn't be opposed to you doing something like that. But it's definitely not something that I expect. as the tank matures, it's only going to look more natural. Banger? Yeah, it for sure is a banger. I guess it would make sense in that sentence to have some divider between the two last words in the setup in the sentence. But yeah, for sure, this tank really is a banger. I couldn't have put it better myself. So 9 out of 10. I'm like considering a 9.5, but I'm trying to stay like slightly more harsh on my rankings, not get too generous, because that way it kind of loses its what can you say, like it loses its meaning or value or true impact whenever a really high rating does come up. But yeah, 9 out of 10. Good job with this tank. Now is the next one. I have scrolled back and forth so many times. This enclosure houses morning geckos, and the person was also considering adding some Epipodobetes anthonii in the future. And I will try to find this message as well. Here we have it. Do I have the message as well? This one is not very old. I think this is about a month up and running, which is really great if that's the case, if I haven't misread anything. Yeah, you can obviously see on the plans that they haven't like grown in that much, but still I think it looks really good right now. And then you can imagine when it will have a few climbing plans, you know. I really like the background and escaping with all of the cork bark. Oh, that was really bad. I don't know why I keep scrolling. And you can also see a nice little water feature here. The fact that this one is going to house potentially Epipodobetes anthonii makes me appreciate the water feature a bit more, since they can actually breed in a water feature in the tank with barely any interference. I still like to feed the tadpoles with fish food just to make sure that they don't get like what do you say, like malnutrition or whatever. I cannot translate that on the top of my head. I was thinking about a word, whatever, or undernourished or something. I still prefer to like support feed them a little bit, but it's still very nice watching them breed completely on their own in the enclosure. So yeah, I think having a water feature with this species isn't really too bad. There is one thing that I thought about when I saw this enclosure first, and that is the fact that I think this background is a cork bark background, and if that's the case, which I'm pretty sure it is, I would definitely turn off this waterfall, because this looks like a waterfall. Because if the cork bark stays either in contact with water in like any way, if you have any cork bark here, that is definitely going to make it like break down and tear apart very quickly, and that's really not something that you want. So like it's going to destroy the tank. Like cork bark is fine if you have it like you have it right here, basically, when it stays like semi-dry. But here, whenever cork bark stays in constant, like more than light moisture, that's going to be an issue eventually. So personally, I would turn off the waterfall if that's possible. That would be like the easiest solution. And also if there's any part of the branch that's like in contact with the water, I would do something about that. Oh, we have a donation. Thank you for the $3, Stinky. That will go down in history as the first ever donation to this channel, which is great to see. Wait, has that one been there long and I have missed it? I don't know. I don't know if it just came up or if it's been there for like 5 minutes and I just haven't noticed. But thank you for that. And you say that left to right branch is really attractive. Yeah, for sure. I really like this one. Having more branches is kind of what I realized that I'm lacking in my biggest enclosure, the Vivarium Rebirth series. Like I would really want to have one more branch that's going like in the middle of the tank, like on this height, if you get what I mean, because that is a great way to cast shadows. Currently there obviously aren't too many epiphytes on it, but that's something that you can change over time by just adding them, given that this is a fairly fresh setup. But yeah, this is a great tank and a freshly planted one, and I can certainly see a lot of potential with this one. I like the plant choices, they make sense to me. I don't really see too many climbers that are going to like do a great job at turning the background a bit more alive, but there is something here which might be a ficus. This is like a microgramma fern, which can sort of do that, I think. And here is, I don't know if that's a ficus or like a different microgramma or something. It could be an oak leaf ficus, the Pumila quercifolia. I don't know. I don't think I would want to add ficus to a setup like this, though I would consider like maybe ficus punctata or just a bunch of Markgravias for this one, simply because I think you would want something to grow on the walls, so it's not going to stay brown like this. But you have a lot of climbing plants here which are slightly bigger but will still cover it up eventually. But so yeah, really good job for a freshly planted setup, and I think if we keep in mind that this one is going to only grow in and be better and better over time, I think we can give it like, if you sent this in like 3 months, I think it would be an 8 for sure, and I might as well just give it an 8 now, because I can see the vision, if you get what I mean. You say that fern moss would look great. I assume that fern moss is like Selaginella, you mean, or some other thing? What is fern moss? Oh, it's an actual type of moss. I mean, Selaginella is neither a moss or a fern, so it makes sense that it's not that one. But okay, yeah, you mean to cover the background. I mean, that makes sense. If you get some nice moss coverage to cover the background, that would for sure be a good option as well. You might not want to put it like all over the entire background if you're going to house frogs, because they tend to struggle with climbing on any like of the, you know, thick and I'm not sure if I can say like branchy moss, but maybe you get what I mean when I say that. Like any of the moss that's like long, not vines, but something like that. The frogs tend to struggle with climbing, but having some here and there for sure would be a great addition. Maybe also like just painting it with moss mix, or getting some, just buying some moss from an aquarium store and like squeezing it into some crevice will spread eventually over the background. So yeah, moss for sure is a great idea for this one. I think Christmas moss tends to do fairly well in tanks too, and just some random things that I've had popping up with or without my consent, we can say. I always appreciate it, but it sometimes just appears out of nowhere, which is really fun and interesting. But yeah, I think an 8 out of 10 is solid, if we keep in mind that it's going to flourish into this 8 out of 10 when it has grown in a bit more. Like I like the bromeliads, and I like the plant selection, but maybe more plants could be added. So yeah, great job with that one. And let's move on to the next one. This one houses 5 Dendromedes leucomelas juvenales, and I think that I will see if this person wrote something else too. We have a lot of the large, like 90 centimeter wide exoteras, which is quite nice. Yeah, it doesn't say anything besides the fact that they're going to add more climbing plants to cover the background better, which does make sense. Although you have some of this, I think it's Solanum species Ecuador. Maybe it has a real name by now, I think, but that plant at least. I think this is a really good example of like a nice looking tank. Like the plant selection is very solid. It looks very green, and I really personally like the fact that there aren't any colors that just steal too much attention. Like basically the only colorful plants in this tank is like the philodendron El Choco Red and this thing with like a red stem, but it's not like it's purple and pink and whatever all throughout the tank. It's more like discreet. If I don't know if the translation of the Swedish word diskret is actually discreet in English. I don't think it is. I think it's like modest, maybe. Yeah, it's mostly green, and then you notice the few plants which aren't too green. If you get my point. I really like the fact that the green is like the main color in the tank itself. What else do we have to say about this one? You mentioned adding more climbing plants, and for sure that would be a good idea, but also, like if we compare it to some previous tanks, there are some other tanks that we have seen in this live stream that I have been more wanting to add more climbing plants to. Like here you have a really good start with the oak leaf ficus. It's kind of funny that the placement of like the big oak leaf ficus bush is like here at the front rather than at the background. But sometimes they don't want to cooperate. Like maybe it's the fact that you know, they simply take off in some places where you don't expect them to and refuse to grow in places where you want them to, or you get what I mean. Yeah, like for sure it's not a bad thing to add more climbers, but I don't think you will have a lack of climbers. Maybe something small leafed in this corner, because these plants might not spread like down here. They will probably just go upwards and then go upwards here to the left side, but they're never going to like go down here. But you also have the philodendron scandens here, or hedracium maybe. You also have that one here, so it's not too necessary, and there's even more oak leaf ficus here, so I think that's totally fine. Regards to plant choices, the philodendron El Choco Red will outgrow the setup. Also this Neprolepis cordifolia, I think it is, or some really similar species, is also one that grows really huge after a while. Like I've had it get 45 centimeters tall in my big setup when I had it there a long time ago, and then when I was going to cut it out, I had to like go into the substrate with scissors and cut in like a circle around the roots, because the roots had spread all across the bottom. And then it also keeps sending out rhizomes all across the tanks. So that's not a plant that I'm too big of a fan of in an enclosure, because they tend to grow really big, and once you take it out, it's not like you can trim down half the plant. Like you will have to take it out eventually whenever it reaches a certain point, and that will be a very sad moment whenever you get there. Though I am a huge fan of the Davalia. I've been kind of unsuccessful with it lately. I've killed off a few vines of this one, and I haven't really gotten like a big proper plant to restart it. But it's a plant that I really like in vivariums, because the petioles or the leaves just stay appropriately sized, which I really appreciate. And yeah, you can see a few frogs in here. They seem to be having a good time. So yeah, well done with this one, I think. And what score do we give this one? I think this is an 8 for sure. Like it's somewhat freshly planted, but or well, not too freshly planted. You can see this like massive oak leaf ficus bush here, but you know, despite the fact that it's somewhat on the new side, I still think it's a really impressive setup. Like it's green, it's lush, and it's beautiful, and it feels like whole. There's no big empty areas, like maybe a tiny bit here if you want to be really pessimistic, but like this plant is going to grow, it's fine. So yeah, I think an 8.5 out of 10 is good for this one. I really like it. Welcome to the stream, Fish Guide. No worries that you're late. I haven't gotten around to your tank yet, so there's no worries about that. Yeah, well done with this tank, and let's move on to the next one, and I'll see if there are any more messages I have seen. Yeah, so the next submission is this one, which is a crested gecko vivarium, and the person said, 36 by 24 by 24 crested gecko vivarium, shaded dweller, UVB bar, jungle dawn plant life, jewel roof, cutout misting, false bottom / drainage not visible but it exists, and a diverse cleanup crew. Kind of like all the selling points there. Though I appreciate you mentioning the UVB light, because that is something that you cannot tell from the picture, obviously. I don't even know like what these measurements are. Like 36 by 24 by 24, I don't feel like that's possible. Like 24 inches, like a crested gecko is like what is that, like max around like 10 inches or something. Or does it not make sense? Or like if I convert that to it just feels like this setup really looks like it's an 18 by 18 by 24, but it says it's 24 by 24 by 36, and I assume that the measurements are like swapped compared to the normal order. Like if you compare the crest gecko size to the enclosure size, like the enclosure feels like it's just barely over twice the gecko length, and the gecko length is like 20 centimeters, which is half of 45 centimeters or something like that. So it feels like the measurements are wrong, but I'm not sure. Maybe it's the perspective, like the gecko is really in the foreground. I have no, I was just a bit confused by that, because when you see the gecko like this completely in the foreground, it looked really small, but then like it also kind of isn't. I generally consider 45 by 45 by 60 to be like the minimum, but like a perfectly acceptable crested gecko size. But yeah, as you mentioned, it looks like a 45-60, which is 18 by 18 by 24. Because if you compare the gecko length to the width of the enclosure, it doesn't feel like it can be. I don't think this is a 12 by 12 by 18. It looks bigger than that. But I'm not sure. But it certainly doesn't look like 24-36. But anyways, that is just a silly side note discussion, because I found that a bit interesting. But I think, assuming that it's 45-60 centimeters, I think the size is acceptable, but it's definitely in the smaller range. And when you do have such an enclosure in the smaller range, you really want to squeeze in as much hardscape and as many plants as you possibly can. And I really like the fact that you have these branches, which definitely are a great start at utilizing all the dimensions of the tank, because you see a lot of beginner crested gecko setups where there's just a flat background and a flat ground and some plants leaning against the background, and then like over here, but imagine that you're viewing the enclosure completely from the side, like background here, front glass here. And then they have like what did I say, background here, front glass here, or was it vice versa, background here, front glass here, and then they have like the background here and then some stuff here, and then all of this space just behind the front glass is just completely empty. But now you do have all of these branches, so it's not completely empty. I would like for there to be more like larger leaves as well, if that would be possible, because that way the branches won't feel as exposed. Sorry, I dropped my microphone, so maybe the audio was funny there. But imagine if you had like a big golden pothos which grew all across these two branches and like hung down, then it would be like a lot less exposed, and I think the gecko would certainly appreciate that. But it still has places to climb, and unless it's totally panicked by human existence, it should be fine. But yeah, I think you can definitely squeeze in more plants, but I like the start you have with the branches here. So some large-leaved and robust plants, like, yeah, I guess just a longer golden pothos vine is the most logical thing that I can suggest. Maybe some big climbing philodendron or something that you could even place on the ground and have up against this side here. Or some other big aroid. I think that would be a major improvement to the setup, because the thing I'm noticing is that it feels like there is a lack of large-leaved plants here, like at the front, specifically because that's the way that you could make the enclosure feel way more grown in and like more interesting, basically, if that makes any sense. So I think that's the main improvement that I have suggested. And given that, like, I think the size is acceptable, but I think it's certainly in the smaller range. So for that reason, and I think that it's still a very pretty setup. But as you say, a bigger enclosure would definitely benefit the gecko. I totally agree with that. Though, if we are correct about the size, then mine is only like slightly taller. I have 45-45-90 or 18-18-36 for mine. Though that one is like crazy grown in right now. There's a massive cork bark tube and like big cork bark branches, and also a huge philodendron which is squeezing leaves all the way up to the top of the enclosure. So like, but still, like, mine is only slightly bigger than this one, but it's just scaped in a way that it's completely overgrown, and really has like maximum surface area for the gecko. This sounded a bit like bragging. That was not my point, but like, you don't need a huge enclosure to make a really good crescent gecko setup, though something bigger is always better, of course. But in this case, I think that like, more big plants are what this setup would need. And I was talking about like having a golden pothos vine hanging down over here. I kind of want to change my mind, or of course that would also be a good addition. But something that might be even more effective is like planting a huge golden pothos here and sort of leading the vines upwards, because when it's based in the substrate, I think it has better opportunities to grow quickly in many cases. So that might be something worth considering, like placing not just a tiny cutting but like a huge established plant. Just go against what I say in my dart frog videos all the time, because this is not a dart frog setup. So like, if you were to place like a huge established golden pothos here, or some other similar plant, of course there are many different options, but then sort of direct it to go upwards against the glass and all of that, and it will obviously go towards the light, then I think that would be a major improvement. But so for now, I think 6 out of 10 is a solid score. Like, it could be more grown in and stuff, but it looks quite pretty, and it could have been bigger, but 6.5 out of 10, something like that. So good job with that. And time for the next submission. What did I do? I'm very confused right now. It's just in my own OBS layout, like the streaming software. It's not something concerning about anything else. I just did like a weird misclick. So speaking of whether you were able to submit... sorry, I did miss a chat message from Christopher Bludow. Haven't you saying, yo, where can I send pictures? Haven't you already submitted enclosures to a previous review live stream? Because I recognize your name, but you can read the description. There is an email address that you can send one picture to, and I will, once we have gotten to submission 26, I will take a short break and then add the new enclosures that have been submitted during the live stream to, well, you get my point, and take a look at that. But okay, back to what we were doing here. So speaking of whether you were able to submit enclosures for animals that aren't frogs, well, the answer is yes, you can. And this person submitted their paludarium, which doesn't house anything on land. If it did house any dart frogs on land, you can imagine that I would probably have said something about this water feature being on the big side. But it only houses some endless guppies and sunrise platies. I didn't know what sunrise platies were. I did know what a platies was, or a platy was, but I had to Google that one. But it just houses some fish, and given that this one houses fish, I'm definitely not going to say too much from the animal standpoint, though it looks like they have plenty of space here. I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to fish. The enclosure itself looks quite pretty. It's the very overgrown aesthetic, which can look very beautiful if it's pulled off well, and I think it is in this case. I guess this is just all golden pothos and maybe some other plants in the mix as well. But when you just let it grow for a few years, it's going to look interesting after a while. Yeah, and you also have some nice house plants, some beautiful bonsai here, which is also fun to see. I don't know what this branch is. This like a branch that's just hanging out of the setup here? I think it is. It looks like the branch is going out of the setup, so there's no like lid for the enclosure, which does make sense if there's nothing on land. And I also see a chat message about the rockscape with all the pebbles. That is certainly something that looks quite interesting in this setup as well. So I don't know what we're giving this one. I think 7 is like a good, somewhat average score. Like, it is a really beautiful, as we said earlier, like portal to the forest or whatever. Even though you can also like realize when you look one step beyond that it's just like golden pothos and duckweed and like some other plants here and there. But you know, this is proof that you don't have to make it too complicated for yourself. Like, you can have one fast growing plant species and get a nice looking enclosure, and it's totally fine if that's what you want to do. So yeah, I'll give it a 7 out of 10, and if I was an aquarium review channel, I might give it a different score, but I'm just going to give it something somewhat average. You say it looks beautiful, but what about air circulation if you want to keep frogs in it? Isn't it important? I think if you wanted to keep frogs in this one, you would have two bigger issues. One being like a water feature that I would say is a bit big, and the other being that this branch is going outside of the enclosure. So I assume that there is no lid for this enclosure whatsoever, or that this branch is like stuck in it somehow. So I think ventilation is most likely not an issue, given that this branch is sticking out. I think there's also some like open space up here. Ideally you would want cross ventilation or to have like a fan in a dart frog vivarium, but if you have a lot of ventilation at the top, it can also be fine. It's not always completely necessary. But that is an interesting point to raise, of course, if you want to keep dart frogs in here, which it seems like the person who submitted this one is not going to, most likely. But yeah, great job with this one, and time to do the next one. So here we have an enclosure that houses Dendrobates tinctorius assyrius, and I will check out the message as well. This person actually submitted 2 of their enclosures, and I only included one here. They had set up a more recent enclosure, which is very not grown in, but probably will look better in the long run than this one. But I still just decided to pick this one for the stream. They mentioned that they don't really like the cocoa fiber background, and for sure that would have been the first thing that I would have commented on as well. What else did they say? Yeah, it was basically that. Yeah, that would be the main thing that I would have noticed as well. I did use cocoa fiber backgrounds a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and I really regret that now, because the parts of it that stay in constant contact with moisture are simply going to fall apart within a few years. It's really like strange in its water transportation properties, which is of course not ideal for obvious reasons. So good on you for not using that in your future vivariums, but like, it works for a while. Some plants will like it. I noticed that Margravias hate growing on it for some reason, but it seems like this Solanum does not hate growing on it, and you can definitely find more plants that also don't hate it. Maybe I would consider adding like a ficus to just cover up the whole background, and once the background eventually does fall apart and break down, the background will also kind of, the background will also kind of be like kept together by the ficus roots, if you get what I mean. Like if you were to cover the entire background, yeah, you get my point. And there's also not like too much complicated hardscape or like really mesmerizing backgrounds that you wouldn't want a ficus to cover up. Like I think adding a ficus in here across the ground level here and let it climb upwards would be a pretty good addition to the tank. Hello Squosy, yes, this is your vivarium, it seems like it is. I don't know if you're from the vivarium. Did you grow up in here? That would be a very interesting backstory. What else I have to say about this one? I do notice that you have a screen mesh top, which I have also had in previous tanks, including the one that I had the cocoa fiber background in. And that is just going to make it a lot worse to maintain the humidity. I can notice that it seems like your like leaf litter layer and substrate stays quite on the moist side, which I can assume is from very frequent spraying due to the fact that the enclosure dries up quickly because of the ventilation. It's difficult to say too much about other people's setups when I don't know everything about them, but yeah, you get my point. Yeah, so that's just something that I noticed. There is a risk that it gets like a bit too wet across down here. I think it's probably also time to add more leaf litter and to make sure to cover all the substrate and not just a little bit. But yeah, that is just like small details. I don't know what this plant is. I guess it's like a pilea or something. I just found that one a bit interesting. If you want to enlighten me in the chat, feel free to do so. But I also noticed some nice moss growth here on the cork branches, which is very nice to see. I can answer the chat question about whether this is a silver dragon though, because yes, it definitely is. And if I'm wrong about that, that's very embarrassing because I just answered a question that wasn't intended for me. But yeah, and you mentioned you just changed the leaf litter or added more because it's not necessary to take out the old one. But yeah, that sounds good for sure. Yeah, I think this is a solid approach for a vivarium, and I think that I think it's very similar to my old setups, which I did with having both the cocoa fiber background and the screen mesh top, and because of that combination, getting a funny humidity balance situation where the substrate gets a bit too moist for my liking. And it also doesn't really look like you have a bark based mixture, but rather something more soil-ish. So yeah, it's checking all the boxes for what I did in my earliest setups, and a lot of those things are things that I have changed or stopped doing since then. Yeah, maybe I should have included your other setup as well, but I figured I wouldn't because that one wasn't too grown in. But I think that one has good potential to work slightly better in the long run, potentially. You also asked a question about the other vivarium, which was taller, about what animals you would want there, and you were considering a Rantomea species. And yeah, I think a Rantomea would be reasonable. I would recommend trying to pick one that's fairly bold once you're new to the hobby, because if you pick one of the super shy or like the ones that is kind of a gamble where you get bold or shy ones like Sirensis, Vancellinii, Benedicta and so on that can sometimes be super shy, then there's a big risk that you really won't enjoy them at all. Fantastica can be a bit different as well. If you get like Variabilis or Amazonica or like Imitator Varadero, I think it's very likely that you will get bold frogs and you will appreciate them a lot more. But especially if you let the tank grow in a lot, so there's a lot of like big leaves and plant coverage in it before adding them. That will also affect their boldness. But that was just a side note about your other enclosure that I figured I would answer since you asked the question But I get that it doesn't really make too much sense for all the viewers who haven't even seen that other enclosure that I'm talking about. I just went really strict on only one picture per person in the presentation, because over time it's going to save a lot of time in this live stream, I think. And I always get really confused, like, oh, how many pictures did this one submit? Like going back and forth a lot like that in the live streams. But anyways, I think this is a solid start, but it also feels like you made pretty much exactly all the same mistakes that I did in my earliest setups, like in my earliest iteration of my big tank, which I think you've probably learned from some of that for your other build, which is great to see. But so for now, I think we can give this setup like a 5.5, 6 or something. Yeah, I think 5.5 or something should be good for this one. And I'm sure that if we give it like 5 months or something and I do another one of these streams, I usually always do one on New Year's, because then there are a lot of people who are at home and have nothing better to do while not being at work or school or whatever. But anyways, if you send the new tank again, then I'm sure that it's going to look really nice and beautiful. So well done on this first tank, and good luck in the future. Exactly as Stinky says, every mistake is an improvement in the future. Speaking of Ranitmea Amazonica, this is a setup that houses two Ranitmea Amazonica Arena Blanca, which I think I haven't kept Arena Blanca. I actually haven't even kept Amazonica. I used to have a frog that used to be an Amazonica, but now that locality was instead designated to Ranitmea variabilis. They figured that out. Yeah, you get what I mean. But I think the idea of keeping Ranitmea Amazonica Arena Blanca is a really good idea, because like it's a beautiful red frog. It looks very similar to Ranitmea reticulata, but it's going to be a lot bolder, more easy to breed, and like more outgoing, I would say, in general. Like it's not one of the finicky Ranitmeas, if you get my point. If you based on like how Amazonica and Variabilis, the two sister species, generally behave, and like how much breeding success people have had with them, and how much non-breeding success people have had with them, if you get my point. But anyways, yeah, the message about this one didn't really say too much, besides the fact that there is a UV7 lamp. Is that like 7 UV index or something? I don't know. But it does mention that there is a UV lamp in here, which I haven't really been brave enough to try in my tanks, though I will probably add it for my Promilio at some point. But yeah, anyways. So it's only this picture that we have to go off of. It looks like a good start. The one thing that I'm noticing is that it feels like everything above ground level is rather dry for some reason. Maybe that is there may be like some plastic foil inside of this screen mesh top. If there isn't, then I think that's the reason why it looks on the dry side. But it kind of feels like you've wrapped the entire top in plastic, because there are these like bends here, which I don't know what else they could possibly be. But if that's not plastic, then that's probably why it looks so dry in the upper portions. Like though you have some moss even living here, so maybe it's just like a distribution of moisture from the misting nozzles that's weird, or maybe you haven't misted the tank in a few hours when you took this picture. So it's a bit difficult for me to say anything too precise about that. But you get my point. My rule of thumb is that I want to be able to find like plenty of traces of moisture all around the upper half of the tank. Like seeing some branches also always being like slightly colored, like they're not bone dry, but rather like somewhat humid. But you of course also don't want everything to be soaked, and especially not the entire substrate to be like dripping wet. But so that's like the first thing that I'm noticing that could be I don't know, an issue. I will also mention that this tank looks really small on this image, but it's actually 90 by 45 by 60 centimeters, like the second biggest Exoterra. We have had a lot of those today. But yeah, just wanted to throw that out there. That it's a bit bigger than it looks at first glance, which I'm sure the frogs enjoy, especially the fact that it only houses 2 Ranitmea amazonica. They tend to be a lot more bold and outgoing in groups in general, Variabilis and Amazonica, that is. So if they are a bit shy for you, you could add like 5 more probably to this size tank with no issues. But now we're getting a bit off topic, or maybe that's not off topic, I don't know, I'm getting tired. Anyways, what was I going to say? Well, yeah, I don't know why I said yeah, because I hadn't figured out what I was going to say. Most of the plants that I see in here are really centered on ground level, though, as I always say with climbing plants, I prefer planting them on the ground and like trying to direct them to grow upwards rather than like hanging them or anything. And now that I think about it, I do see a ficus here, and that ficus is definitely going to cover a big part of the background here in like a few months or so, so by then it's not going to be an issue. And if you also direct this Monstera siltepecana to go slightly further back and like upwards here, then I think that's going to be you know, also make sense in the future, I think. I don't know how many climbing plants you have here on the right side. I don't know if this is like a dried up Monstera siltepecana leaf or like maybe a Piper sylvaticus or something. I don't know. But maybe I guess you have the Peleonia here. If you could redirect that one slightly, then that could also... Oh, why did I do that? I was going to move my face cam on OBS just to let you see this corner of the tank as well. Yeah, I think maybe, you know, if you either trying to redirect this plant, like maybe taking a cutting and planting it right here, like upwards here, would be a good idea, though maybe this fern will also handle it. That's like my main point, because I simply don't see any climbers on the right side of the setup, and that could be that could leave like a hole in the setup, if you get what I mean, in the future. So that's the main thing that I can think of that I would like to change about it. And yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it looks slightly dry in the upper half, and I don't know if that's like the misting cycles being funny, or there being a weird ventilation balance or something else. But I will leave you with those thoughts to deal with, and see what and do the best with the advice that you've been given. Yeah, so what do we give this one? I think it looks quite beautiful still. Like, I really like the scape, and once the plants have grown in a bit more, then I think it definitely has potential. For now it looks quite bare here in the upper half, while this corner is instead really full on the contrary. So that is, you know, a bit funny, we could say, if you get what I mean. So yeah, I think a 7 or so. I will increase it to a 7.5, because this is a big beautiful tank for 2 very tiny frogs, and that is always great to see. And I think, you know, I will always, whenever there's something that I'm slightly concerned about but cannot say for sure, like in this case the humidity balance or whatever, I will have the like innocent until proven guilty sort of attitude, so I won't go too harsh on something along those lines. Same with like assuming that an enclosure that doesn't have frogs yet obviously will have leaf litter added later. Similar to that one, I won't really like judge this one too harshly on that. Also, whenever this thing on the Vriesche bromeliad is dead, you can cut it off if you want to, unless you think this is really beautiful, then you can of course keep it around. That was just a side thought. But yeah, I think I will give it a 7.5, because it's a big tank and I really like the scaping of it. And as I mentioned before, it's easier to change plants around than to change the entire scape, and I think you have a really great hardscape selection here with you know, branches really taking up parts of the enclosure. So it's great to see, and well done with that. So 7.5, and time for the next one. And here we have another crested gecko vivarium, and you can see my previous review of this one in my last vivarium review live stream. So let's see if you have taken my advice to the core. I don't remember what my advice was. It was probably like add more branches or something like that, or like add more big plants to cover the entire volume. But we were talking earlier about clay backgrounds, and I think this is something along those lines. Maybe I should have checked what we said about this tank in the previous live stream, because I think this person was also in the chat and like answered questions about this enclosure that I was asking, like how the background was made, etc. But I don't remember any of that. But if you watch my previous live stream, the last vivarium review live stream, not the Q&A stream, and you go to submission number 3, then you will find whatever we said about this one last time. It would be really embarrassing if I gave this one like a lower rating now, even though it has been improved over time between this. Why do I keep doing that? Even though it has been improved between these two sessions, simply because like my rating system is inconsistent or something. That is very possible, but I don't know. We will see about that. Anyways, this is a crested gecko vivarium, as you will all have read by now. And what am I going to say about this one? They also mentioned in the email that they sent that they were hoping that the right side is going to get filled up by this umbrella plant, Paraphylia, or whatever they're called in Latin, I don't remember, which is probably going to grow upwards and grow quite tall. So that is great to see, and I also really like these bromeliads here on the right side and in the middle. Really like, it's not like it's all big plants on the bottom and nothing here at the top. These kind of fill out a lot of space, and once that one has grown and also fills out a lot of space, that's going to be quite beautiful. I don't really have too much to say about this one. Like, it would be possible to squeeze in more hardscape. Like, it's not as completely covered as my very ugly and very overgrown, but I would argue like more utilized for the gecko. My crested gecko vivarium, there's like a huge philodendron just squeezing against the roof all throughout the whole thing. I can barely see into the enclosure. But of course you can sacrifice a little bit of hardscape for the gecko in favor of aesthetic pleasure, I suppose. And I think that's totally reasonable to do in this case, when it's like double the size of my crested gecko enclosure. And once this umbrella plant has grown to like this height, I think it's going to look quite beautiful. And like, of course there can always be more branches, but it's not like it's an issue in this tank. So yeah, I think I'm just going to give it a score. I don't remember what I gave it last time, but I think an 8.5 is reasonable. Or like, if this plant went all the way up here, it would definitely be an 8.5, and I know it probably will in the future, unless you kill it or something. So I will just give it the same score now, regardless, because I can see the vision. Yeah, when this one gets a bit more grown in, it's going to be even better, but I think it looks good. The gecko has a lot of things to climb on, and this large Benjamin ficus is certainly giving it a lot of plant coverage, which is very nice to see. So yeah, great job, and 8.5. That should be higher than last time, I suppose, because it would be really funny if you got a lower score despite having done like significant improvements to the setups. But it's always fun when you submit the same enclosures with a few months in between. Now this time it hasn't really been that long between the live streams, but if you were to set the same setup like a year after or something, that would be really interesting to see. Especially if it was like freshly planted the first time, and then you can compare it the next time. But anyways, next setup, and this one houses two Dendrobates tinctorius Assyrius. And it's a 45 centimeter cube, which is like, I think it's a solid size for dart frogs. I obviously wouldn't go smaller for any of the big dart frog species, but like, it works. It doesn't feel too cramped, in my opinion, to keep a pair of dendrobatus or something inside of. This setup is very interesting because I don't know if there's any ventilation on it. I can kind of assume that there might be like a ventilation panel here at the front, but it's something that makes the alarm bells ring. But once again, it's something that I can't really say too much about, so I'm not going to hold that against you to do strictly. Like, maybe there is a bunch of ventilation and a fan here or something like that you just can't see in the image. And in that case, it's probably not a concern, but yeah. And you mentioned in the email that it's very messy, and yeah, I think that's the main thing that I think about when I see this setup. Then, you know, the frogs are certainly going to love a messy enclosure, for sure. There's nothing wrong about that. When you have the Tradescantia is like a recipe for having a messy tank. They will just grow all over the place and have to be trimmed down. And if you have any like plants that you really care about, they are just going to outcompete them. Like this Selaginella, of course you can keep them trimmed down, so it's fine. But in general, they're just going to cover absolutely everything. So I personally don't like to use them. I think they're even worse than ficus in that regard because they are a bit bigger and sproutier. Especially the fact that they're sproutier, they're more like all over the place rather than just covering the wall or something like that. And you also have the fast-growing Ficus sagittada or Ficus radicans. I think those are synonyms or something. But yeah, it is quite messy, but I think the frogs can certainly enjoy a messy tank. Me personally, I'm not going to give it a super high score from the aesthetic viewpoint for that specific reason. You can actually see a frog here. I didn't notice that. I'm not going to give it a super high score from the aesthetic viewpoint, especially since, you know, here at the front you can see a bunch of huge leaves squeezed up against the glass here in the corners, but then in the back it's like almost completely bare, besides this tiny little Selaginella. And I think the setup would make a lot more sense if it was vice versa. You know, of course you want to mix different leaf sizes and so on throughout its setup, but especially I still try to focus, you know, big leaves towards the back corners and smaller leaves towards the front, and then kind of have a gradual transformation or between those. So I think that would just, the enclosure would make more sense in that case. I also realized when I was pointing here at the corner, my face cam might have been covering it, but this is what I was referring to. So yeah, I'm not going to give it a super high score, but I think the frogs are probably happy in here, assuming that the ventilation is fine, and I can see some leaf litter. I'm not sure if it covers all the substrate, but it should be fine. I think a 6 out of 10 is a suitable score for this one. Maybe 5.5. I think a 6 out of 10. There's nothing that seems concerning to me besides potentially the ventilation issue, but I cannot fully judge that from the knowledge that I have about this setup. But there's nothing that looks like, you know, this is not going to be sustainable besides fast growing plants, and that's not like an actual issue besides that it doesn't look too good. So yeah, I think that's a reasonable score to give it. And now it's time for the next enclosure, which is this one. Have I mixed up the order? I was just checking the things on my... Okay, yeah, I had just mixed up the order of two tanks, which made me confused when I was trying to find the email to read the message. This one said, I'm new to the dart frog keeping hobby. In fact, I haven't had one before. I used to keep other species in bioactive terrariums such as leopard gecko and tarantulas. Here's my terrarium, 10 gallon with 30 by 30 by 40 centimeters. By the time I send this email to you, it's only 6 days old. They actually sent a different email later, but basically it's still cycling, and they had several issues that they want to ask. Yeah, I'll get to the specific questions later. But I think the main thing that I'm thinking about when I say the setup is that I think it's way too small to permanently house any dart frogs at all, really. It's technically 10 gallons, and it's like sort of almost a bit accepted if it's like really well scaped. But I personally disagree. I think it's definitely too small for any larger dart frogs, and also for any thumbnails for that matter. So you could keep it around to house froglets in the future, but I highly recommend starting with a 45 centimeter cube in the future. It is possible to house thumbnail frogs in something slightly smaller if it's really well scaped, so all dimensions of the tank are like really well utilized with a bunch of hardscape and plants everywhere. But I don't really think that it's a good idea for a beginner to try out something like a 10 gallon or whatever for thumbnail frogs, because that's not going to end very well. And you mentioned that you were considering either Epipedobedes anthonii or Phyllobedes vittatus. Epipedobedes anthonii is a great first frog, though for an enclosure that's a bit bigger than this one. I think a 45 centimeter cube is a good thing to aim for a first tank. Phyllobedes vittatus is also a really wonderful frog. I like to say that they are a great second dart frog species, simply because of the fact that for the first 12 months of their lives, or 10 months or something, they will be really shy and always jump away, and sometimes they will be like squeezed in a corner so you don't see them much at all, and this can really stress out many beginners. You would want to start with something that's moderately or really bold, so that you can see them at feeding time, keep up with them, see what's happening, and simply learn how they work and get some confidence in your husbandry skills. And for that reason, I think for many people, starting with Phyllobedes vittatus is not that good of an idea, but having it as like a second frog is really wonderful, because they are amazing frogs, and when they grow to their adult size, they are truly amazing. But yeah, I'm sorry, I don't think any frogs should go in this one besides future froglets, but you can always keep it around for plant propagation and so on. As far as the tank itself, ignoring the size of it, the first thing that I think about is the coco fiber background, which I really don't think is a good background option. I have mentioned it in some of my really older videos because I used to have it in some of my tanks. It's a really bad idea, and especially here it looks like it's really moist already now, like it has managed to suck up a lot of moisture, and I think it looks like in this case, if I'm just going by my gut feeling, like it's actually going to fall apart within like 6 months or so. It's not even going to take like 2 years like it did for me, or like 3 years or something. This looks like it's going to be just a pile of threads in a very short matter of time. So yeah, I really don't recommend the coco fiber carpets in your future setups, and if you want some like easy 2D background option, I think cork bark is significantly better. Hygrolon is also very useful. So yeah, that's I think the main thing. I like the idea of just having this begonia and ficus pumila if you just want an overgrown tank without caring too much about like preserving a super crazy hardscape. Like in this case, the overgrown vivarium route, as we have seen in many cases today, is a good route to take. Like you don't have to make it too complicated for yourself. You don't have to make it more complicated than it has to be, basically. So I think the plant choices are solid. You have a lot of the plants squeezed up here towards the back, and I think you could put something here at the front, because the way that you currently have it, you're going to have a lot of plant growth in like the back 5 centimeters, and here at the front it's completely empty, which does look good. I was actually criticizing the previous enclosure because it had too much plants at the front, but I think something here would be a good idea. Maybe you could put like a ficus pumila quercifolia, which is a bit smaller than the normal ficus pumila, like here right in front of this wood piece, and then it would go upwards and backwards. Maybe that would look good, but just something to get still some plant growth here in the front. You do have this one, which I really don't know what plant this is at all. Please enlighten me in the chat or in the comment section if you're watching this afterwards, because I would like to know what this is. It feels more like something that you would go and pick out in the Swedish forest rather than a tropical plant. But if it's actually a tropical species, I would be really interested in knowing what it is. But yeah, I think this is a solid setup that could have some froglets in the future, or maybe some other animals, but not a permanent dart frog enclosure, in my opinion. So I'm supposed to give it a score as well. Yeah, I think given that it's a fairly small setup and it's nothing too spectacular, I think a 5.5 should be good, or like a 5. And I'm sure that if you were to set up something slightly bigger in the same way, though don't use the cocoa fiber carpet, again, just a recommendation, but if you were to set up something bigger in the same way, then it would definitely get a slightly higher score, for sure. But yeah, good luck with getting into the dart frog hobby in the future. And it's time for the next one, and that is this setup. You can hear the misting system going off in the background. It was a very short mist, apparently. I don't even remember what I put my misting cycles at, but that was not many seconds. Anyways, here is... Wait, have I skipped a vivarium? I think I have. I think I've accidentally deleted a vivarium from the presentation. Though I can actually add it back later once we... or I'll just... Yeah, I have deleted one vivarium from the presentation. That's unfortunate, because I did add it, but then it got removed. That's funny, but I will add it later at the end of the stream when I go through the new submissions. Anyways, here is an enclosure that is someone's first attempt at a dart frog enclosure, which it's a really good first attempt, I think. I'll try to find the message as well. This person started keeping dart frogs roughly a year ago, and only tried 2 species so far. At first they had Ranismea syrensis, but they were a bit too shy, so they replaced it with a group of Ophaga Pomelia punta, which is a really beautiful frog, for sure. By the way, I missed a chat message as well, saying that Tinctorius are a great beginner frog, and I totally agree. They are great beginner frogs for the same reason that Vitarus aren't great beginner frogs, because that is a frog that you're guaranteed to see all the time and be able to like keep track of, so you learn how the dart frogs work and get like a gut feeling for the animal, if you get what I mean. So yeah, for sure it's a great option. But anyways, back to this setup. Yeah, the person asked me if I had any advice on plants to add in the future, or any tips in general, and they also mentioned that they added more leaf litter after this photo was taken. There was very little in the picture because they had just added live moss and liverwort on the ground. And we also have the creator of the tank in the chat, so nice to see you here. Yeah, I think this is a really nice looking setup for a first tank. It looks, like a conventional dart frog setup. Like, it makes sense. That's pretty much what I have to say about this one. I might also move my face cam temporarily so you can see the whole setup. Yeah, like this. Yeah, the corkbark background looks good, and you have some nice moss coverage here on the ground. I also like the plant choices. There's nothing that's like too outstanding that steals too much attention. Obviously the Philodendron verrucosum is one of the main plants in the setup, but you also have a nice selection of bromeliads, some nice orchid right here. There's just nothing that takes over the whole thing. I'm trying to think of what plants I would add in here. I think I would be a bit... yeah, you have the Ficus punctata here. given that it's going to grow pretty much only in this area, I would make sure to also add some climbers here. Maybe this is like a Rhaphidophorahii or something. I don't know what this is, but I can assume it's not going to cover this entire side of the background on its own. So I would like to add either just more Ficus punctata here or something else. Maybe I would even consider Ficus pumila crucifolia, but of course you can prefer slower growers than that if you want to. But I would definitely want to add some more climbers, especially small climbers, to get the sides to become a bit more green in the future, if this was my setup. I'm trying to think of what else I would add. This was a random ficus cutting you got from your friend. Okay. But yeah, I think some kind of ficus or like other green backdrop plant on this side would be great, because it would feel a bit unfortunate if the entire right wall stays brown, besides the tiny moss growth here and so on. Yeah, you can try adding the Markgravias. Depending on the species, it's not going to go quickly or anything like that. I like to just place the Markgravia cuttings on a patch of live moss, or bury, like have a 10 centimeter vine and bury half of it in the substrate and have the other half above the substrate, and lean it kind of against the background. They can be a bit finicky if they don't like what they are put on. But yeah, Markgravias would definitely work well in this setup. But I would just maybe be a bit eager to have something that grows slightly faster, given how much space there is to cover. But yeah, some more climbers. Maybe I would also add something more with maybe not like verrucosum sized leaves, but still something with slightly bigger leaves. Trying to think of some examples of it. It's hard to do on the spot. Like maybe, Monstera siltepecana could be a good idea. Maybe some, like whatever aroid you like with smaller leaves. That's probably what I'm trying to say. Maybe Philodendron ornatum could work. I see you have some nice Philodendron micans here on this side. Something with a similar vibe on the right side I think would make a great addition. I also add Begonia prismatocarpa in like all of my tanks. I'm not sure if it matches the vibes of this enclosure, but it's something that could be worth considering. And you can also consider Peperomia marginella if you want a bunch of tiny round green leaves. To make it look really lush and all of that. But yeah, I think you need some leaves that are both more tiny leaves, especially on the right side, because here on the left side you have the huge Philodendron verrucosum, which makes it so that not too much else is necessary. But some more tiny leaves and some more slightly bigger leaves, like this size range, on the right side, and I think that would make a great addition to this setup. But Begonia Chulsea is actually a good recommendation as well. They do grow very quickly and sprouty. Like Begonia prismatocarpa is very, what do you say? It's kind of limited, it grows in a bush, it doesn't get all over the place. But they are definitely, Begonia prismatocarpa will be more like going in all directions, like kind of take over, but still it can definitely be a fun addition, and they're not super difficult to trim down, so yeah, that's a good idea. And more orchids are certainly not a bad thing either, if you want that, and you can find some large leaved ones like Pleurothallis ruskifolia is one of my favorites that I've had. Unfortunately I killed it, but that's what happens with orchids. We're gonna give this one a score. I think you have a great background and hardscape, and you have a really good plant selection, but some more plants certainly wouldn't be a bad thing. But I think an 8 out of 10 is a solid score for this enclosure. It would be really interesting to go back and watch all of my vivarium reviews and see how consistent I am with scoring, because I feel like I'm getting more and less generous here and there with different tanks. So if I were to like actually put them in a line or whatever in comparison to each other, then maybe my points wouldn't hold up. Philodendron melanochrysum is also a great option, as well as Philodendron splendens. Their leaves tend to size up slightly slower than verrucosum in my experience, so that is a great option. Like for me, melanochrysum stays like this big on the leaves for the first, I don't know, 40 centimeters of growth or something, and then they will eventually grow bigger and bigger, of course, but they stay moderately sized at the beginning, so a melanochrysum would be a great idea, and Philodendron splendens is worth considering, though it's slightly bigger. But great job. What did I say? 7.5, 8? I think an 8 out of 10. It's a good looking setup for sure. And it looks like you have very freshly misted it when you took this picture. Otherwise, I would make it let it dry out slightly more, so not every leaf is like completely soaked. But I think that's probably just the misting cycles, most likely. But yeah, great job with your first tank. It's quite impressive for a first vivarium for sure. Here I have the next one, which I don't think are some first vivariums, though they are very freshly planted. I will just turn off my phone, I don't want it on. So these two enclosures were freshly planted, and they were supposed to house two different Ophaga pumilio localities, and I think that's all that it said in the email. I quite like these setups. They are very simplistic, like it's just hygrulon, not flat against the wall. It seems like there is foam behind the hygrulon or something, but still, you know, rather simplistic, and there are a few climbing plants. These tags are definitely going to look way better once these climbing plants have done their work. Like you see this Markravia, I guess, umbellata here, and is this a ficus? I feel like a ficus would be out of place for a person who did like this scaping of their tank and this plant selection, but maybe it is a ficus, I don't know, or it's some other thing. But once the climbing plants have grown in, it's definitely going to be a lot better, and I was saving that point for last and almost missed it. But yeah, the rocks in the tank to the right are really great. I think I'm going to give a score to the tank on the right, because the one to the left doesn't have the amazing rocks. I would be very curious to know how you made these rocks. I would, based on the feeling I get from watching these vivariums, I would guess that this is just foam painted with dry lock or something. I would have done it with hypertufa, which is a very easy and fast and efficient method of creating fake rocks that I have shown on the channel. That video got very few views, but I think it's like one of my more definitely one of my better and more useful videos for building vivariums, because it's a very unknown thing in the hobby that you can use, but that's a very easy way. But this one, I feel, do we have the creator of the tank here? Blue collar keeper, is this your enclosure? If this is pumice, then that is very interesting. So you just cut the pumice, okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously the only thing that beats a realistic fake hypertufa rock is of course a real rock. That makes it sort of, I guess, easier to resemble true rocks by having true rocks. Yeah, that certainly makes sense for this to be real rocks, because they are very beautiful. I see a question about Ophaga and whether Neoregelias are too tiny for them. I have had my Ophagas raise a froglet in not just a Neoregelia, but like a really tiny one. I don't think there's like a free cubic centimeter of water in it. So I was expecting that they couldn't even raise tadpoles in there, but then I saw a froglet jumping out and I was so surprised. But that enclosure only has tiny Neoregelias. That said, I think I want to upgrade them to an enclosure where they have a huge Veracia, because I think slightly larger water volumes are going to be going to be worth a lot for them, and possibly creating like stronger offspring or whatever, and just making it easier for them. So yeah, I aim for bigger bromeliads if it's possible, but they can certainly use neoregelias. Anyways, that was a side note. I just wanted to flex the fact that I got a bromelia offspring basically as early as it's possible for me to have gotten one. After buying my Bromelio male, I had a froglet within like 2.5 months. But anyways, back to these enclosures. Yeah, they're obviously freshly planted, and I think they are going to look way better once they are not freshly planted anymore, just like with most other enclosures. But I see a lot of potential. It has a solid hardscape, and wherever these plants are growing all over the place, it's certainly going to look quite beautiful. So I think we're giving it a 7 for a very solid start, but for these enclosures to be really beautiful and naturalistic, it will need more growing in to do, which is obviously going to happen over time. But I feel like the way there is going to be rather long, so I'm not going to be like, yeah, I can see this one plant is going to grow, so I'm going to just assume it already has, like I have for some of the other enclosures today. Like, the journey is long, but it will definitely get there, and you have a really solid foundation, especially with these rocks in the one to the right. So certainly a 7, and yeah, the rocks are a bonus, but they are so extremely freshly planted, it's hard to give a super high number. But well done, and maybe I will look into finding some pumice and cutting it up with a handsaw. That would be quite interesting, I think. Anyways, next submission is this one, and this one is even less grown in, I would say. This one was intended to potentially house Dendrobates tinctorius green Cephalawini, but I don't think that is in any super near future. I will try to find the message to give it the full context. Yeah, here we have it. Yeah, it just says that the tank is 18 by 24 by 24, and it still has a ton of growing in to do. And this person has been out of the hobby for 8 years, but is excited to be starting again. So welcome back to well, the bright side, or whatever, of people who keep frogs. Yeah, this enclosure is, in many cases, with a freshly planted tank, you can definitely see the vision, and like I can see the vision here, but the journey for this enclosure to like get there is really long. Like, it's currently very empty. With Tinctorius, they don't care that much about, you know, having a ton of hardscapes, so everything is covered in shadows and big plant coverage and so on. But you know, I'm sure that you have the intention of adding a lot more plants, or letting the plants you have grow a lot more before adding frogs, and of course also adding more leaf litters so it actually covers the substrate. Like, you can clearly see this pot is intended for some plant to put here. I would definitely add more large hardscape pieces in this one, like some corkbark, tube that will act sort of like an arch or whatever would be nice to have here in the front, and something else to lean towards the back. I think you will definitely have to add more plants to get more plant coverage, because otherwise this is going to look extremely bare for a very long time before it's grown in. I know I always preach that, like, I personally like planting my vivarium sparsely in the beginning and all of that, but I think you will need more to start with still, for it not to take like an incredibly long amount of time before you can have something worth showing, or whatever you want to say. But yeah, of course, more leaf litter, some big hardscape pieces are necessary, and definitely add more plants still. So yeah, but I'm assuming that this isn't like a finished setup. We have the creator in the chat here. That's mine. There's now an Ethereum vertarifolium in the wall pot, still waiting on some more plants. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I'm not trying to judge this one as like a completed setup. If you told me that you had frogs in here right now, you wouldn't get a very high score. And obviously, since it's not completed, I can't exactly give you like a super high score either. But I'm assuming that there will be more things added to the setup, and I fully trust that that is going to happen. Yeah, I mean, it's a good start. You have a nice background which isn't completely flat, so you have something to work with, if you get what I mean. Yeah, looks good. It's a very difficult one to give a score to, so given that it's not completed, I can't really give it more than a 5 now that it's not completed, but obviously when it is completed and really grown in, because these are really tiny cuttings all across the tank, and it's going to take quite a long time before it's covered, even if you add a few more species. But someday it will definitely be a really nice looking tank, but for now I'm not going to give it a super high score. But good luck and welcome back to the hobby. Time for the next vivarium. We're getting closer and closer to doing all of the new vivariums as well that have been submitted during the stream. I think we have like 26 submitted in advance, and then I will add all of the new ones to the slideshow. But here we have an enclosure that's intended for Dendrobates auratus Highland Bronze. I think we had some enclosures previously that were a lot bigger than they looked in the image. I think this one is actually the opposite. Like, this looked like a really huge tank at first, and then you compare it to like the size of the Fittonia leaves and something, and it's actually a bit smaller. I think they said it's a 25 gallon, which I don't have the measurements of standard 25 gallon in the top of my mind, but at first it looked like it's bigger than it actually is, but it's certainly good enough size for some Dendrobates auratus. I think this person even mentioned that they were going to get like a breeding group and then upgrade that breeding group and keep this tank for froglets, which is certainly a nice approach to go with, because whenever you have done your first setup, you're going to want to make a new one, because regardless of how good or bad the first setup is, you will always find improvements for the next one. So it sounds like you have a good mindset about your frog keeping, and I think you're going to do really well whenever you get to getting the frogs and all of that. But looking at the setup itself, we were just talking about the size before. That's not the most important thing that we were talking about. In terms of the quality, I think this looks good. You have plenty of leaf litter here. The humidity balance looks reasonable. I'm not sure about all of this live moss, which looks like something that you've probably collected outside. It doesn't really always do too well in enclosures, but to each their own. It's not something that I like to do, but it is also possible to turn it around and get it to survive. I think the thing that I would change is I would like more backdrop plants, like more climbers with small leaves, because right now it's really just this moss and a bunch of medium-sized leaf plants should be the right word. A bunch of that at the moment, and I would like to add something more. As I've said with pretty much every single setup, it's the eternal question is like, is ficus suitable or not for the setup, depending on like how much you like the hardscape and the background and how much you're willing to trim it. But you can also consider like Markgravias, or just the more slowly growing ficus. Also Begonia prismatocarpa is my favorite plant that I put in all my tanks, or at least favorite like small neutral green plant. But something like that, or just pick the slower growing ficuses like Ficus punctada. You can try Markgravias, they're a bit finicky at times, but could work if they like the background. Yeah, I think that's my comment. I would add more small-leaved climbing plants, because right now there's a bunch of, I'm not gonna call these medium-sized plants, but still like bigger plants that aren't really covering the background. And if you want the backgrounds to stay green, you will need something to grow on them. So Ficus pumila quercifolia is like, I would definitely strongly consider adding it, although some find it a bit too quickly growing. And Ficus punctada is like a really safe and good option for that. In terms of giving this one a score, I don't know exactly what we're going to give it. I guess 7.5, because I think it looks really good still. So yeah, like it's a solid looking tank. Everything feels reasonable, if you get my point. Yeah, good job on that tank, and good luck with the future frogs. And here we have submission number 21. I have seen you in the chat, Mr. Spiked Reptiles, who has sent this one in. He's usually the first one to send in his vivarium to the live stream, but this one, this time he sent it really late for some reason, so that's interesting. He's giving some space to everyone else who wants to be featured. But this, as I mentioned before, it's always interesting seeing the vivarium with some time in between. And this specific vivarium, this is from another Swedish guy. Like, I've seen it in the forums and Facebook groups and all of that. So it's not like, wow, I've never seen this tank before. But still, when I went back and I just checked what image you sent me last time, there is a big difference between this live stream and the previous live stream. It's just a lot more green now. I think last time, I don't remember exactly what score I gave it, but I think my comment was like, yeah, obviously this is a really nice looking background with these custom trees and all of that, but the setup didn't feel, you know, complete yet, because there was so much room for like more big leaves that just weren't there, if you get what I mean. But now it has certainly come a long way in the right direction, and while it probably has more growing in to do, it's still, you know, yeah, you get my point. It has definitely grown quite a lot since then, and looks a lot more green and lush this time, while previously it was a bit like empty in some of the areas in the tank. In terms of the inhabitants, it's black-webbed flying frogs and a bunch of fish that I don't know anything about. And you also mentioned in the email that it was going to get partially torn down for moving it to a different room or something. Like you were going to, I guess, take out some of the plants and redesign parts of it, which is something that always feels a bit heartbreaking at the time when you do it, but it's usually worth it in the long run. You will usually have created an even better vision in that time, so I definitely see that can be a good idea to do. I made several revamps of the previous iteration of my biggest tank, and they were definitely improvements that I made along the way. So yeah, just doing a bit of rescaping in a tank is not something that you should be too afraid of doing. Of course, it's not something that you want to do all the time, constantly. That's a bit sad for the frogs, but yeah, you get what I mean. But yeah, I think this is a great looking setup, and yeah, I don't remember what I gave it last time, but it feels a lot more complete now. I think a 9.5 is reasonable, but it still has a little bit of a way to go before it's a complete 10. I guess I gave it like a 9 or an 8.5 last time. I cannot really remember. There were a lot more empty spots that time, but yeah. I also noticed that the water feature is a lot more green this time with whatever this plant is. That has grown quite a lot. But yeah, I think 9.5 is reasonable for this tank for now. It still has a little way to go before I will give it a 10, but keep sending it in before at every review stream, and once we get to follow it to one day get there. So yeah, well done. Time for the next one, which is this enclosure. That is, I had written down that it was intended to house Epipedobetes anthonii, but I don't remember anything else. The message says that it was planted a few days ago and will house some Epipedobetes anthonii. So it's in a tough situation, competing against a bunch of tanks which weren't planted a few days ago, but were planted like years ago. So obviously I'm still not going to give like a super high score to a non-grown in tank, but that's definitely, I don't know why I did that. That's definitely something that I'm keeping in mind for this one, that it doesn't really have a too fair shot. I think this is an excellent start for a vivarium. Like, you have good plant choices, it's not overplanted, but it's still not underplanted. Like, I can see that this vivarium is going to be grown in a lot faster than, let's say, this setup, which obviously wasn't completed in this image and it wasn't claimed to be, but I can see that this tank is certainly going to become a jungle like a lot quicker, but still not too quick. It's not like you've started with a huge golden pothos that cover the entire tank all the way to the roof and then it's going to go in circles beneath the lights or anything like that. But it's still like a solid start. It's not going to take a stupidly long amount of time before this enclosure is, you know, something to really brag about. I think this is a great start, and I think some Epipedobetes anthonia would be really happy in here. Like, it looks reasonable. The plant selection is really great. I don't have anything to criticize about that at all. I like the fact that you have all this Peperomia and Marginella here in the middle. I think it's going to look really awesome whenever that hangs down on all of these different sides. It's such a cool plant. I really like it, and want to try to use it in more of my tanks in the future, this Peperomia. And you also have a nice fern here and so on. Maybe, I don't know how many like Margravias, or maybe it's something here actually. Maybe there could be like slightly more Margravias on the right side, but they probably are there, just not visible. But that could cover the right wall and so on. But yeah, it's difficult for me to say. But I think you did a great job with this tank and deserve a rather high score despite the fact that it's freshly planted, because it looks like it's done in a very professional manner. I guess the non-professional thing is the fact that you have covered the mesh top in, it looks like cyanowrap or like plastic foil or whatever you want to call it in English, rather than replacing it with glass. But it works. I've done the same in a few of my smaller tanks, and like, it works. It's just not the best long-term solution. But maybe it's a bit too late to add glass instead now that you have actually planted it, and you don't really want any silicone in there, because the plants are just going to melt in that case. Plants and silicone is a nightmare. Don't try it at home. But yeah, good looking setup and really great start. Obviously it's not the prettiest because it's completely freshly planted, but I'm still really impressed, and I would love if you sent this one in like for the New Year's edition of this live stream or something like that, so we can see how it has done over time, because I think this is a very solid and reasonable start for an enclosure. I think I'm going to give it a 7.5, which is probably a very high score for my standard for an enclosure that was planted a few days ago. So well done on that. Here we have the next submission, which houses 4 Dendrobates auratus. Was this the one from Fish Guide? I think it was. So we have the creator in the chat. I'm also trying to find your email, wherever that is. It says, my very first poison dart frogs live in this terrarium. The enclosure was designed in January of 2024, so it's about a year and a half old. And the frogs went in October 2024. The back wall is made out of cocoa fiber mats, which we have talked about plenty of times today. It's not my favorite, though in this case maybe it's fine if you have plans to cover it when it eventually sort of falls apart in some places. The mountain on the right is made out of construction foam. I don't know if their behavior helps with your criticism. At first they were only active during feeding, but since I moved and the terrarium came with me, I see them regularly and relatively relaxed. The only other thing that has changed is that I water less often, 1 to 2 times per day. My friends who have kept frogs for years told me that 3 to 4 times a day was way too often, and I've always hand sprayed since then. So that was the message. Regarding how many times you missed it per day, it's really something that varies a lot depending on how much ventilation you have and also how many seconds you missed for each time. You heard my misting system go off for like 5 seconds max earlier today. I think I have like 5 misting cycles per day, and it varies between like 5 and 15 seconds. And I also vary that during different times of the year, but there's definitely room for a lot of creativity with the misting cycles, and the most important thing is that you can judge whether the humidity is like suitable in the tank. You have a question about what aroid is in the front. I actually don't know what this is, but good thing that fish tank is here to enlighten you, hopefully. I guess I should place down a guess, but I cannot think of like a good guess even. The way it grows, it feels like an alocasia or something, but it was a syngonium. I was going to say syngonium, but it looked way too big. The enclosure was 70 by 40 by 80 centimeters, so those are massive syngonium leaves. But okay. Yeah, this enclosure is really grown in. You mentioned something about being worried about the enclosure not being grown in, and obviously that was like a year ago, but I think it probably was, because this is a really lush and overgrown beautiful jungle, to put it simply, and I'm sure that the frogs are doing well in here, and the behavior that you mentioned, that they were a lot more relaxed and you see them a lot, that is a good indicator that the scape is good and that the enclosure is grown in and well scaped and so on. So kudos on you for that. One thing that doesn't really make sense to me is this bromelia that's just like laying on the side, which is interesting and maybe not the most natural thing. Maybe, I don't really know, but that's a bit interesting. You can also see some sunburn on the philodendron micans here, which is very common for them. They get these, maybe it's not actually sunburn, but they get these markings on the leaves like all the time. But yeah, I think this is a beautiful enclosure. It feels complete in a way. Of course, it's not like every single part of it is completely perfect, but it's a very solid frog enclosure, and I'm sure that they are very happy in here. So I think an 8 out of 10 is perfectly reasonable. The plant choices aren't something like super crazy or anything, but still, like, it works, and they have been given the opportunity to grow in a beautiful way to cover the tank in every way, and yeah, you get what I mean. It's an anthurium at the beginning, and the leaves are red and get green. Which one is an anthurium? Which one is an anthurium at the beginning? That's like implying that it's not an anthurium at the end, which is an equation that I cannot really comprehend. Was just a bit curious about that, but anyways, I've given this one an 8 out of 10, so let's move on to the next one. And here we have an enclosure that houses a trio of Dendrobates tinctorius assyrius. I cannot tell the exact size of this enclosure, but I would assume it's like an 18-18-24 or something. The sunbird one, this one is definitely not an anthurium. Or maybe it's a different plant here in the same place. This really looks like a philodendron micans to me. But maybe you're referring to some other sunburn plant in here. Anyways, this enclosure looks like it's somewhere in the range of like 18 by 18 by, maybe it's like 18 by 18 by 30. I don't know. It looks really tall. Maybe it's a bit wider than the image is actually showing. I have no idea. But you can see two beautiful frogs in here, and it looks like they're having a good time. This is another enclosure where I think the main thing that I'm reacting to that makes me like the enclosure is that like not the proportions, but yeah, the proportions of the scape just make sense to me and like looks good. It's difficult to describe it, but it's a balance throughout the tank, which I really appreciate. Obviously this one has a lot of common plant choices like the golden pothos, which is known for sometimes growing all over the place. I'm curious about what this netted plant here on the background is. So if the viewer is watching this right now, enlighten me in the chat, and if you're watching this afterwards, the creator of this tank, if you're watching this afterwards, enlighten me in the comment section of the live stream instead. Feel free to do that, because I would like to know what that is. But still, the spread of greenery and the spread of hardscape, the fact that there are a lot of secluded areas in here, is just something that looks really good in general in this tank. So I really appreciate looking at it, if you want to put it like that. We also see a nice little fan here, which seems to have some mesh here to make it animal proof, which is also great to see. Yeah, that is also great. I usually don't use these big alocasias like Alocasia amazonica and those closely related hybrids, simply because they tend to grow very big very quickly, and you cannot really trim down alocasias in a good way. Like you can just cut off the petioles and then it's going to send out an even bigger leaf instead, so it's not very worth it. Discidia ovata makes a lot of sense now that you're saying it. That wouldn't surprise me if that's the correct identification of it. But yeah, I really like this setup. Despite the plant choices being mostly on the simpler side with the epipremnum and stuff, I just think the one word that comes to mind when I'm trying to describe this vivarium is simply balance. Like it's a good distribution of both hardscape and green stuff, and I really like it. With all of these corkbark branches going upwards here. It also looks like, I don't think they connect like these two pieces, but it still looks good that it looks like they're coming from the same place. That's what you're trying to imitate, like some big root construction or something. So yeah, I really like this one. I think we're giving this one an 8 out of 10 for sure. Yeah, I think an 8 out of 10 is reasonable. Maybe 8.5 feels a bit much, but it's getting difficult to compare this one. I should have put the standard like way higher when I started doing all of these reviews. Like I very rarely hand out anything lower than 5, so I basically still only have like 5 points to work with rather than 10. So yeah, it's difficult to say, but I think an 8.5 feels a bit generous, but maybe let's say 8.25. You will get a 2-digit 3-digit number, which is not something that a lot of people like 2 decimal places number, which is not something that I hand out too often. But 8.25 feels reasonable for this one. And here we have not the final one. Before adding the new submissions that were sent in during the stream. This one houses a pair of Gonatodes albogularis and a single morning gecko. Not sure how well those come along, but given that I'm not sure, I'm not going to say too much about that. And they were also considering adding a group of Auratus, which sounds like a reasonable idea. I think this enclosure is 45, 45, 90 or 18, 18, 36 inches. Most likely it's a pretty big setup, and I think adding a group of Aurados probably wouldn't be an issue, given that they have it's a lot of height, so you get a lot of opportunities to have different temperatures at the top versus at the bottom. And the large star frogs with but still in the Dendrobates genus, which aren't like crazy ferocious eaters or anything, tend to do rather well with small geckos like these ones. So adding a group of Aurados should be totally fine, most likely. But I'll try to see if this one also said anything else. For now, it houses plant species native to Central and South America, and then what animals that it houses. Yeah, I think this is a really good looking setup, and this one also has a lot of balance. I also like this, I guess this is Begonia mauridiae, not something like that. I don't know what the letters are and what order they come in that name, but some begonia starting with M, which has really taken off on the background. It's covering everything, and I really like it actually. I've been trying to find that species myself for a while, so if any Swedish person has it, you know where to find me or where to get in contact. I also like whatever you have covering the ground here. The image quality is not perfect, so I cannot really tell in too much detail, but it looks like you have something nice here. And of course the Philodendron gloriosum or something, which might outgrow the setup soon, who knows, but it should be fine for now. But I think this is just a really solid looking setup. It's very green, it's very lush, it's very beautiful. I'm sure your geckos are happy in here, and a few frogs probably would be as well. So this one should definitely also get a high score. Should we do an I think an 8.5 is totally reasonable for this one. I really like it. With many of these really tall tanks, it can become difficult to it can become very difficult to utilize the full height of the enclosure, but yeah, still that is I think this is a good and inspirational example. Had this been like a crested gecko vivarium, I would have given it a much lower score. Not only are there a bunch of delicate plants that wouldn't be able to handle it, but also I would have liked to utilize the open air a bit more. But for frogs and micro geckos, I don't really have too big of a problem in that regard. So yeah, I think an 8.5 is reasonable for this tank. Well done, and good luck with any future potential frog additions. Before getting to the next one, I see a chat message. Hello, I had submitted my vivarium the first day you made a post about it. It was a bearded dragon vivarium. I checked my entire inbox today, and it was a bit difficult finding the really old messages because I've had a bunch of spam messages between that. But I haven't even seen a single bearded dragon vivarium while going through all of them. Just asking, because I've made a lot of posts about this potential stream. Do you know what day you sent that message? Because there has been so many announcements about this stream at like 3 different points in time that I'm not really sure when it is. But if you give me a date, and I will look for it while I look for the 4 or so enclosures that have been submitted during the live stream, which I will also go through after taking a short break very soon. So let me know what day you sent it to me, and I will try to find it. Or you could just send the same message again if you want to. But now I have the final vivarium before I take a short break, and this one is intended to house some Dendrobates or some Phyllobates, which sounds like a good thing to start with when you're getting into the frog hobby. We really saved a lot of the really great enclosures for last, because this is another really beautiful tank. Once again, it feels really balanced and complete in a way, and this one will for sure be quite overgrown in a while. Like you have a lot of ficus here on the left side, and you have some philodendron that's already squeezing up against the top. I'll try to see if you mentioned something about how long this one has been set up. Started 3 months ago. Yeah, I think this is some good growth for only 3 months for sure. I can also see you have used some plastic to cover up ventilation, which is really nice in the beginning of a setup. I have done this with the most recent thumbnail frog setups I've made. Is that before adding frogs, I have blocked off all the ventilation, so it's just really humid and constant condensation everywhere and so on, which gives the plants a great head start. And then I gradually obviously reopen the ventilation before adding frogs because I want it to be a bit more dry. But that is a good idea, to really bump up the humidity a bit extra. Then of course you might not want to like release the full screen mesh top when you add frogs, but you get my point. That is a good recommendation for those of you who are watching this, that I have liked doing recently. But I think this is a really nice start, and it is going to be very overgrown soon, but that is a perfectly valid approach. The only thing that's unfortunate is that it seems like you have a nice custom-made background that you've actually put effort into. Like when someone has had like a cocoa fiber background or cork bark background or whatever, then, you know, let the plants grow all over it. Nobody cares. But here it seems like you put actual effort into your background. So it can be a bit unfortunate if it gets completely covered, but you win some, you lose some, I guess. And this tank was also 100 centimeters wide, 50 wide, and 40 centimeters high. So it's plenty of space for some nice terrestrial dart frogs. Like you could put quite a large number of Phyllobates in here if you wanted to. I just noticed, is this a water feature in the back? Or is... I don't know what this is. It looks so suspiciously flat, like there are like floating plants here or something. I'm not sure though. But it might be, which is interesting. Of course, you know, water features are possible if you pull them off well. It also adds many ways to mess up your enclosure, but still, you get what I mean. I will just assume that it's set up well, and that it's going to work, even though there can, of course, be issues coming with that. But anyways, that's besides the point. I think this is an excellent start for... start into the hobby, and you will definitely have some happy frogs in here whenever you get them here. I want to give this one another like an 8 out of 10 for sure. You've had a good streak of many nice looking enclosures now for a while. I'll also bump this one up to 8.5 because you have a background that you put actual effort into. So that is a great job, especially for a 3-month-old vivarium. Now I will add the 4 vivariums that were submitted during the live stream, as well as one that I had included in the presentation before but accidentally deleted that slide, I think, because I haven't seen it here. So I guess I will be taking a short break, and I think I will... I mean, I could leave you on this screen so you can just see my beautiful face while I try to do this, but I feel like that will just make it more stressful and make it take more time. So maybe I should put on the that overlay that you just saw. Yeah, I think I will do that. I might drop some viewers while doing that, but that's totally fine. So I will try to be back within 4 minutes or something. It shouldn't be too long. So see you soon. And feel free to entertain yourselves in the chat while you're waiting in some way. I think we are ready to continue. The final number of submissions in this live stream will be 32, it seems like, and I have added a few more that were sent in right now, and one that I had accidentally deleted from the slideshow earlier. So it's time to do right about that one, which didn't go too well before. Now I'm just spoiling everything. That might not be very fun. Actually, let's start with this one. We start with... No, it's going to be difficult to jump around in the VOD if I go to do them in the wrong order. I was thinking it would be kind to start with the one that I had accidentally deleted. Wait, what? There was already a 27 in the slideshow that I hadn't even... somehow I didn't even click on this slide. Like I ended here and was convinced that the slideshow was over, but this one was already here actually. This one, the only thing I wrote about it was that it doesn't house frogs yet. So I probably assumed that it would in the future. Though I cannot find the... Oh, here I have it. This is my vivarium that I built like 4 months ago. I want to get some Rennet Mea imitator, or do you have a better idea? In the background there is a little waterfall. Imitators seem like great frogs. I haven't personally been able to keep them yet, though I would certainly wish to do so in the future at some point. But that would definitely be a great choice. In terms of this enclosure itself, I think it's a really good looking dart frog enclosure. The only thing that I'm not personally a huge fan of the plant choices, because I think there are some species in here which are a bit on the unnatural side, though I mean I suppose they do exist in nature. It's just that I personally not a fan. However, there definitely seems to be a fan of these plants in the chat, so it's good that there is freedom of opinion and people can think differently. So maybe if Dynamitala would have given you a score, she would have given you a higher score than I'm going to give you. But this is a good looking tank at least. And in terms of like the spread of plants, it's that's one of the best things about this tank, I think. It's not like everything is on the ground or something like that. It's a good distribution of greenery, except it's not always very green throughout the whole enclosure, which I really appreciate. I noticed that there is a mesh top and also some light that seems to be like a heat lamp or something, which is interesting. Given that you have a misting system, it is sometimes possible to have to still maintain a good humidity balance despite having a screen mesh top, but that's something that can vary from case to case, and in many cases I think you will have a lot more success covering a large part of it. Great question in the chat whether that's a real rock in the back or not. I don't know if the creator of this tank is here to answer your question, but that certainly would be great. I would personally always have used like a bit more green plants, as I mentioned earlier. I'm not a huge fan of all these weirdly colored ones, but I'll try to not be too biased in that regard while giving this tank a score. It feels like all of these later tanks have been really similar in the case of like, I've really appreciated, you know, the balance in the tank. I have no better way to put it than that, so you'll that now we're getting way ahead of ourselves. I don't have any better way of putting it than like the balance in the tanks makes sense. It feels professional in a way, and I think that's definitely a good sign, and I think some Rennet Mea imitators would be very happy in here. So what do we say about the score for this one? I've been handing out so many 8s and 8.5s in a row. It's starting to feel repetitive at this point. Like, why are you even watching the stream? I'm going to give an 8 to every single enclosure. But I think this is a very reasonable 8 out of 10. And if you like weirdly colored plants more than I do, rather than plain green ones, you might give this one a higher score than I do. That's totally fine. But yeah, I think an 8 out of 10 is reasonable, and you would definitely have fun with Renitme imitators in here. So great job on that, and good luck with the frogs. Here we have the next submission, which only said that it was 60 by 40 by 40 centimeters, and it houses Dendrobates tinctorius. I don't think the message said anything else besides that, if I remember correctly. This feels like a solid setup, and it's an example of a good way to scape a tank when you don't have a background for it. If this corkbark tube didn't exist, this enclosure might as well have been 20 centimeters less tall, 20 centimeters shorter, and it wouldn't have made a difference. But here you can see that even though there isn't technically a background, there are still so many ledges and shelves for the frogs to sit out on. And so even though this enclosure is not massive or anything, I think you have utilized the space in a good way. If you had like a really shy frog species, I would probably also have tried to paint the back of the enclosure black or something, just so there isn't too much light from all angles. The frogs would be happy about that, but I don't think a Dendrobates tinctorius would care about that, to be honest. I also couldn't tell from the email if this person already keeps Dendrobates tinctorius in here, or if they were just planning to do so. So I'm not too sure about that. The thing that I would definitely change, I think maybe the chatters can actually guess in the chat before I'm going to say it. I would definitely add more leaf litter in here, because I don't see any at all, and in a large frog tank that's a pretty good thing. To kind of compensate for the more mossy areas, though I think it's also totally fine to have. It seems like you've mixed a bit of live moss and some shredded dead moss to kind of give the live moss a good starting point, which, as long as you don't cover the entire ground level in dead rehydrated moss, I think that's totally fine to just mix it up with a bit of live moss, give it some humidity balance, yeah, to give it a good starting condition to start growing in. But yeah, I would definitely add leaf litter. As Joel Needham put it, he said the thing. I certainly did. But what else do I have to say about this one? You could probably add more plants. I also think, given that you have the oak leaf ficus and you have the philodendron micans, that this will also be enough to fill in the setup eventually. There is some really massive aroid in here. Is this actually a philodendron gloriosum in here? I think it actually is. I'm just realizing I'm peeking into the camera and how to check on my monitor. You can count how many nose hairs I have. But anyways, it looks like this is a philodendron gloriosum squeezed in here, which is definitely going to outgrow the setup within like the next 3 leaves it produces or something. Maybe 5, I don't know. But that is going to be difficult for you, especially to get it out when it's like behind this huge corkbark piece. But I think the scaping of the tank with these 2 big corkbark tubes is honestly a great example to follow. And if you have a background-less tank, this is the way to do it. I usually also say this is not based on like science. Of course, you can disagree with it, but in my opinion, I think that for any tank that's more than 40 centimeters tall or 45 centimeters tall or something, you need a background to fully utilize the height. But this is an enclosure that literally is 40 centimeters tall, and you can see that it works pretty well to utilize the height with only a bunch of hardscape in this case. So yeah, I mean, this isn't a super spectacular tank by any means. I mean, it has 2 corkbark tubes and some plants, and it does need leaf litter. So I think, but I still like the composition of how it looks, and it is also possible that this person hasn't added the frogs yet, and in that case the lack of leaf litter is forgiven for that obvious reason. So I think a 7 or 6.75. I feel like 6.5 is too harsh. Actually 6.5 is perfectly reasonable for this one. I'm just trying to remember what scores I've given to previous tanks. I think a 6.5 is reasonable, and if this tank would get like super grown in with lush plant growth everywhere, this is not a tank where I would put like a bunch of slowly growing species. Like I would want this tank to be completely overgrown as fast as possible, given that there is no background. But if this tank was to get really overgrown, I think it could be even better. But it has some way to go before it gets there. But 6.5, great job. I think this is a good example of how to do a simplistic dart frog setup, which is, I mean, that's something that I do occasionally as well for in my recent thumbnail frog builds. That's precisely what I did. So great job. Here we have the next submission, and this person apparently bought cuttings from me at the last Frog Day, which is a little expo we have in Sweden where we buy and sell some frogs and plants and have some lectures about it. If you are in Sweden and you keep dart frogs, you definitely have to join the Swedish Dendrobatid Society, Svenska Dendrobatidsällskapet, and join us there. But so I can only say that the plant selection in this enclosure is truly amazing. At least 10 of these plant species, which allegedly come from me. I can assume that the Begonia prismaticarpa is probably one of them. I cannot see any other plant in here which I could have sold to this person. I don't recognize a single plant that I have in my collection and have sold cuttings from. I'm very confused. I was expecting to see more plants that could have been from me. I don't see a single other plant that... Maybe the oak leaf ficus here could... the oak leaf ficus is probably from me as well. Anyways, that is a big sidetrack. I just thought that was interesting to follow up on how they're all doing. But it seems... I cannot see more than those 2 plant species which could possibly be from me. But anyways... that is besides the point. What else does it say? The size of this enclosure is 150 by 60 by 100 centimeters. I'm not gonna convert that to inches because I only know the standard Exoterra measurements in inches by heart and not much else. And it houses a gang of Phelsuma Robert Mettensi and 2 Dendrobates leucomelas, which this person got at the previous Frog Day as well. And they also said that the enclosure was a bit rushed before that Frog Day and might get redone or partially redone in the future. But it will probably look better when the oak leaf ficus has spread across the hydrolon background, which I can certainly see the vision, as I've said a few times throughout the stream. I certainly do. I think this is a good looking setup and a good start, and of course this fact that it's massive gives you really good opportunities to successfully keep these 2 species together. If this was Phelsumas with dart frogs is not something that you want to try in like a crowded space, given that the Phelsumas have different temperature, humidity and UV requirements than the dart frogs do, so you really need plenty of space to be able to provide from both species. Getting back to plants that could potentially have been from me, I guess this might be some aroid, like I can't tell which one, but this might also have been from me. Just thought of that while looking at the setup. I feel like I remember reading about this setup on one of our Swedish forums, that there was some issue like a leak or something, and that maybe the enclosure has gone through some rough days because of that, which may have, you know, forced the creator to like remove some plants or something, change things around, which I might be misremembering, but I think I remember reading something about this enclosure like that. But yeah, I think this is a good looking start. There is, you know, it's not perfect in any way. You can see some, like, what can you say? There are some beauty issues on some of the plants, like, which is totally fine. That happens. We're all human. I have a lot of ugly leaves in my tanks with you know, burned edges and stuff like that. And you can see some empty spots on the background, but I can certainly also see the vision with when the oak leaf ficus covers everything and it all becomes green instead of watching the black hydrolon and this stuff. This is another nice setup where it has like hydrolon in the middle, and as I said, I think that hydrolon makes a lot of sense when it's up against the glass flat like this, without, you know, a bunch of 3D foam constructions behind it and stuff. So this is quite similar to how I made my biggest tanks as well, with something to the left and something to the right, and just hydrolon between it. But yeah, a good looking plant. I found a fourth plant which can potentially have been from me, which is this Syngonium rayi, and I guess this aroid could be Philodendron micans from me as well. It just took me a while to find the plants that can have been from me. It's just an interesting side quest that I come back to every few sentences when I notice another one, and I cannot even have the be sane enough to put them all in a single sentence towards the end. I just constantly stop saying whatever I was saying, like, oh, that's a plant that could have been from me. That's because it's just a bit fun to do that. Anyways, I think this enclosure, it's a really big one, which is a huge plus. It's not, you know, super green and lush at the moment, and I think that maybe because you mentioned it was a bit of a rush, and I think I remember reading about some other issue with this tank, which may of course have been causing some distractions throughout the way. I would guess also that the reason the plants are like slightly unhappy could be that the upper portion of the tank is staying on the dry side. Like, for example, this philodendron, I think it's like a serpens or squamicola or something. You say you could pack this with hardscape. I don't know what you... Oh, you mean, yeah, you could squeeze in more hardscape in this one, for sure. You could definitely use more of the volume of the tank. Like adding more huge cork branches or corkbark tubes. There's definitely potential for more of that. I also think it's interesting with this bamboo that's just sticking out here. I'm sure the geckos love it, but my aesthetic mind just thinks it doesn't really make sense that it's just hanging there. Like, I would want some kind of support pillars just for it to be logical. But maybe it has fallen down and has, you know, some imaginary support in the slice of jungle that's just outside the frame. I don't really know. But back to the point I was making, it might be that the entire upper part of the tank is like on the slightly dry side, which is causing some of the plants to look a bit unhappy. Like, for example, this philodendron looks like it's planted epiphytically somewhere here. And that's like generally not a good idea unless you have a really humid part, like a bunch of moss or something that it can grow in. Besides that, they just tend to do really poorly when you put it here, and you can see like these leaves aren't the prettiest if we put it like that. And if it had been planted on the ground here and covered, grown upwards on its own like it would have done in nature, I think it would have been a lot happier, most likely. And maybe it's the same with this plant, and same with this aroid that you can see here. Like the few really green plants, you can see this, I think this is a Rhaphidophora tenuis. I can assume that you bought this one from Kent. If this one has maybe it does, this one is also planted epiphytically, but still it's planted in at least some collection of a bunch of soil somewhere in this region, and that one just seems a lot happier when it gets to grow on its own and attach itself completely on its own to the background. While this philodendron that's kind of just hanging there, it looks like it's been forced to be planted like this in a way, and they tend to just not be very happy. Same with this begonia. I think if this begonia was on the ground right here, it would have grown to the same height, but just been just a little bit more flourishing. So there are definitely some plants that like to be planted higher up, like orchids and bromeliads and stuff. But generally with climbers and stuff, I think planting on the ground just makes it a lot harder to mess up. I'm not saying that it's impossible to do these pots on the background, of course, but for me it usually works much better to put them on the ground and let them do their own thing like they would in nature. Anyways, I feel like I've been ranting for a very long time about the specifics about cuttings, but that's kind of the thing that I'm noticing about this vivarium is like some of the plants are not super happy in here. But I think given that it's still a really big enclosure, it does get some plus points from purely from an animal perspective because of the size. Then I don't want to judge purely on the size either, so I think a 7.25 or something, with that 0.25 being a size bonus, is a reasonable rating for this one. And we're approaching the end. I think we had 2 left, or was it 3 left? I don't know. I think it's 2 left. And the next one is it's actually 3 left, I think. But anyways, this next one is a grow out tank for fire-bellied toad froglets, sent in by Dynamite Ella, who was here a moment ago. So this looks like some old aquarium, and it has a really large water feature on this side, which you cannot see from this image, and a bunch of moss growth. So and also this, I think this is Solanum oleanum, which is a plant that I got very recently, was given a cutting of. It's a very interesting one. You don't see many purple plants like this one, and I'm usually not a huge fan of strongly colored or like weirdly colored plants, but this one is funny. I also researched it, and it seems like it's closely related to potatoes, which is quite unexpected in a dart frog vivarium. Obviously, if this tank was a dart frog tank, I would give it a very low score for animal usability. You know, there's a massive water feature and there's soaking wet moss all over the place. I'm just saying this as an educational example, but obviously it's not a dart frog tank, it's a fire-bellied toad tank, and obviously I haven't kept fire-bellied toad myself, but from everything that I do know about them and have read about them, it definitely seems like this is a very proper setup for them, and especially for froglets. I mean, it's not even that you're keeping your adult breeding groups in here, or something like that. Yeah, I think this is a very beautiful setup. You have a very successful moss growth, which is probably slightly easier in a setup like this than in a dart frog tank, considering that you can just soak it however much you like. But it's still quite impressive, and I really like the Dahvalia, as I mentioned on one of the previous enclosures. I think that's just a perfect vivarium plant if you can keep it alive, which I did for many years and then I didn't, and I haven't bothered buying a new one, which, now that I'm realizing it, I don't know why I didn't buy a new one when I was ordering plants from Germany last time. That was really stupid. I should have done that. It didn't even cross my mind that I can like get a new one after killing some of the rhizomes that I previously had, which had been through a lot. But that's just such a good vivarium plant. Like, it's beautiful, it stays properly sized. Obviously you can get like a huge bush of it, but it's not too big of a deal. And you have a nice huge Vrisha in here. I think it's going to grow even bigger, so have fun with that whenever that happens, but you can always just cut off the tips of it. And some big aroid here. Is this Monstera castorianum or something? I'm not quite sure. But I think this is a very beautiful setup. It's quite different from all of the dart frog tanks that we have been reviewing. I think the purple plant is Solanum oleanum, if I'm not mistaken. I have the same one in one of my tanks, though it hasn't. This is definitely the first like huge Solanum oleanum plant that I've seen, which is quite impressive. I'll see really quickly if I can find the email from August 15th. If I can. It seems like I don't have an email that I have gotten on August 15 at all from, or have I? Yeah, I haven't received the email. I have 3 emails that I got on that day, and all of those were frog tanks. Or one of us was a crested gecko tank. So unfortunately, I haven't received that one. Sadly. So what score are we going to give this tank? It's difficult to review it since it's not a dart frog tank. It's difficult to compare it to all the others. The vibe is completely different. But I quite like it, and I'm sure that your frogs quite like it. So I think I will give it an 8.5 just for the beautiful solanum growth taking over, and all the nice moss, and like the moss, the solanum, and the Valia are just really beautiful. Of course, Markravia centennici never disappoints either, but you know, it's not as spectacular as like these 3. I think these are really beautiful and a good example to set. So 8.5, good job on that one, and I'm sure your frogs are quite happy. Is that a frog right there? I think it is. Anyways, time for the final 2 enclosures, or yeah, the second to penultimate enclosure. This one houses 4 Rantomea sirensis, and I will see if they wrote anything else besides that, or if that was all the information I got. Yeah, it just says that the enclosure is newly set up, and that is everything it says. It also says that it's 60 by 45 by 60 centimeters, if we're interested in the measurements. Yeah, this is certainly a good start for a freshly set up enclosure. I think the previous really freshly set up vivarium we had, yeah, was that the one that got a 7.5? This one is quite similar to that in the fact that it's just a really solid setup. Like, I feel like I'm saying the same thing all over again, because when I find a good expression to express what I think about the setup in English, then I just use that same expression all the time. But I can see the vision. Like, I see the potential in this tank, and I can imagine that it's going to be quite a good looking one in the future, for sure. The only reason why I'm going to give it a slightly lower score is that, like the previous freshly set up tank we had this like huge awesome root piece in the middle. This one looks like it has completely flat corkbark backgrounds, or just slightly altered with some tool perhaps, which is the same that I've done in all of my corkbark backgrounds. So I'm not in a position to judge that specifically, but still, you get what I mean. I'm just going to check if I received this email. Why is my spam? Okay, so it seems like your... Wait, what? I haven't actually received your email now either, Snake Draws, I'm sorry. I was just checking my spam folder, and I was surprised to see how much spam stuff I have gotten on it. What the heck? That was a very full folder. Okay. Anyways, if you try to send it again, I might try to look into including it on the stream, but it's not looking good for you right now, Snake Draws. I'm sorry. I still haven't received it. Anyways, what was I saying about this one? This one is just a solid start. You could consider adding some more hardscape elements, and you also mentioned that you had added a few more plants since the last time, which is great to hear. Probably not a bad idea at all. But I like the plant selection that you do have at the moment, and I can only assume that the new plants that you have made also... I can assume that the new plants you have made also follows that pattern of being suitable choices, and it looks like you've gone for the approach of doing Markgravias rather than fast-growing ficus. Actually, there is Oakley ficus here, but still having plenty of Markgravias, and given that you have a background that I think Markgravias are going to like, unlike the cocoa fiber carpets we've seen, which Markgravias always hate in my experience, But given that you have the cork bark background, I think the Markravias are simply going to do well, which is good. And you have a nice selection of bromeliads here. You could consider adding some more hardscape element, because right now the entire middle of the tank is quite empty. And especially given that you are going to keep Ranitmea syrensis in here, which in my opinion can be an extremely shy frog species, especially in like an open scape like this. If you squeeze in a bunch of hardscape and plants, so it feels a lot more secluded, then you can have completely different frogs. It's only one of the factors affecting their boldness, but it's certainly one of the factors. Like it shouldn't be too underestimated. If you had like Tinctorius, they wouldn't really care that much, but with a potentially very shy frog species like Ranitmea syrensis, I think that would be a good addition to have some other stuff. But yeah, that's besides the point. I think you have a good plant selection, which is a plus. You could add some more hardscape pieces. For now, I think I'm giving it a 6.5 for now, and with the plants you do have in here, I'm sure that number is going to be a bit higher. Also, something that I just thought about, I don't know if you've put any Ficus pumila on the ground as well, but when you put it up here, it's most likely only going to grow upwards. So you're going to have this part being completely covered with Ficus, but you're most likely going to have absolutely nothing down here. I mean, besides this, behind this bromeliad, not like in front of it. So that's why I personally always place it at the ground. Maybe you have a duplicate cutting on the ground as well, like that I cannot see on this image. But like if you want the wall to be covered in a way that looks natural, I think putting it on the ground is always the best option, because it will basically only grow upwards. So if you place it in the middle, it's going to be very green up here and nothing down here. It can partially start hanging down in like some areas, but not really that much. So I would prefer planting all the climbers on the ground or very close to ground level. Otherwise you will have completely empty walls like on this height. That was just something I thought about right now. But yeah, I did I give this one a 6.5? I think. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. And once it's more grown in, I'm sure that number can be very increased. That was your goal. You only wanted a small patch or two of Ficus and the rest to be covered by Markravias and Ficus villosa. That is very reasonable as well. Of course, it's a bit misleading for me to say Ficus when you have an actual Ficus which is not comparable to the Ficuses that I'm talking about, which are of course only like the Ficus pumila and stuff. Yeah, I mean that is reasonable. If you only want Ficus here, then absolutely go ahead. I guess the criticism I gave is more applicable if you have that as like your only climbing plants, because a lot of people will imagine that if they place it here, it's going to start hanging down all the way here, but that's just not the way that it's going to focus on continuing to grow in the future. I'll check my inbox one last time if I've gotten the bearded dragon enclosure, but I haven't received it, unfortunately. And it's not in my spam folder either, which is a bit sad. And it's not on August 15th either in the spam folder. Unfortunately, I cannot find it. Make sure you have typed the right email address. And if you cannot get it to me, the bearded dragon enclosure during this live stream, feel free to just join my Discord server and send it there, and I will write something there instead. Anyways, we have one final submission, and that is the one that I should have done in like the middle of the stream, but I explicitly remember creating a slide for this enclosure in the slideshow, but I accidentally deleted that slide, it seems, and then I discovered that I saw this image and recognized that I didn't have it anymore in the slideshow. But anyways, this submission houses 4 Dendrobatus leucomelas, and I will try to see if they sent me a message as well, as per usual, or if there was any less information on this one. Okay, it says nothing besides the fact that the size is 30 by 30 by 18 inches, not the standard 36 by 80 by 36, but 30 by 18 by 30 instead. But that was all the information that we got. This is another example of an enclosure without a background, and this is one that's significantly taller than the previous one. I would say that this is the best example of 80 plus centimeter tall vivarium without a background. Or it's not 80 plus, it's like, is this like 75 centimeters tall or something? 30 centimeters to inches, or 30 inches to centimeters. It's 76 centimeters, so I was pretty close. I think this is the best example of a 70 plus centimeter tall tank without a background of how you have utilized the height. But with that said, it's still really difficult to do it well, and I think that a background would have made the setup a lot more, even if it was something completely flat, like a hydrogen piece or whatever. I still think that would have made it a lot easier to get plants to cover it at all, and so on, because despite the fact that this is like a pretty open layout, but it's like a weirdly closed but still open layout in a strange way. I don't know how to describe it. Like you can very clearly see everything that's going on the ground. I'm starting to just ramble incoherently. It's getting late. I'm getting tired. I need some sleep, I think. But I don't know how I should put this. Yeah, like this big cork branch thingy is, you know, it's definitely the best thing that you could have done in this enclosure without a background, but also a background would be better. That's basically what I'm trying to say, because you have utilized the height very well, and if you had this in combination with a flat background, then that would be really great. But now it becomes a bit open. It was my first time doing a tank, and I tried expanding foam and failed and ended up removing it. That is reasonable. For the neck, I have actually never used expanding foam. I have used a bunch of styrofoam backgrounds, and I hate messing with it when I don't have to. So you can always consider doing either a flat corkwork panel or hydrolon. And if you want a different style of foam background, which is a lot easier, I have a video on hypertufa, which is a very easy method of and very fun method of making realistic stones. If you want to try that. But that's sort of a side note. But that was made by somebody like me who hates working with foam. But that way of working with foam and a bunch of other materials was totally fine with me. But anyways, yeah, like a background would have been better. But again, this is not exactly a tiny enclosure, so it's not like they have insufficient usable space because of the lack of a background either. What I am also noticing is that there are very few plant species, and pretty much every single plant species in here has leaves that are like bigger than 10 centimeters. Oh, I see that you use cork aggregate sheets for other tanks now. That is great to hear. I'm sure that is going well for you. Yeah, what was I saying? Yeah, there are very few plant species in here, and pretty much all of them have really large leaves, and that's kind of, in this case, I think it looks quite pretty, but it's also a way to make your tank look slightly smaller. And I think that if you had been able to mix in, I think some Ficus pumila would be really great in this tank. I would even do the normal one rather than quercifolia, and simply try to plant it towards the glass on like all sides of the enclosure. Both because if it really takes off on the glass, it can actually completely replace like the lack of a background. But also just the fact that if you have a bunch of tiny leaves, the entire setup is going to look a lot more massive, and the big leaves that you do have will look way more impressive in a way. So I guess that would be the best recommendation that I have for this tank, to kind of make the best out of this situation that you have here. Yeah, I would definitely add normal ficus pumila to this enclosure, a bunch of plants, and try to get them to be really overgrown, because then you will have smaller leaves that will make the entire enclosure look a lot prettier, and also replace the fact that there isn't a background. I think there are fairly few climbing plants that will serve that purpose as well as normal ficus pumila. Also, ficus sagittada or ficus radicans, those are basically synonyms, would also be a great option for the exact same purpose. I would even argue that they grow slightly faster, but on like longer vines with fewer and larger leaves. But that would also be a great option if you want to cover the sides. Yeah, I think that would make the enclosure way more lush and jungly in a way. So yeah, that's it. What I was going to say about that. Still, I do really like the combination of leaves that you do have. Like the sizes of it. It feels very interesting to watch for sure. So yeah, I don't know what score we're going to give this one. Do we give it? I think a 7 is a good point to end at. Feels reasonable for this one. It's a big tank, but you have still kind of succeeded despite the lack of a background with this big wood piece here. Like if this didn't exist, this wood piece didn't exist, and all these plants would just be on the ground, it would have gotten a very low score in terms of like the utility of the space or usage of the available space. But this is a really great corkwork piece that really covers like almost all the height that it's reasonable to cover with such a wood piece. So great job with that, and good luck with all of your future builds. I think a 7 out of 10 is a reasonable point to end at, and that should be about it for this stream, I think. So well, it's time for the awkward part of finding out what I should say at the end here. But thank you all for watching. How many are still watching? There are still 22 people watching. It feels like it's getting more and more for every stream that I do. Great to have you all here and share this wonderful Saturday night with you all. If you want to participate in more discussions with the community, feel free to join my Discord server, which is linked in the description, and I can assume that everybody who is watching a live stream like this is probably subscribed, because otherwise you wouldn't have found the live stream at all. But you can join the Discord server if you want to get closer to the rest of the community and keep up like this. I think we have some really fun discussions there. And otherwise, have fun, keep frogging, and good luck with all of your future projects. And thank you all for sending in your enclosures to the stream. Yeah, you will have seen some spiders doing some things in the background throughout the stream. I also mentioned it in the beginning. Yeah, smash that like button for sure. I also mentioned in the beginning that there are two things that have changed in the background, and that is that I've rescaped these two tarantula enclosures, which you will see in parts of a larger video in the future if you want more of an update on that. Also, you can see this tarantula, which I didn't see for many months, but now she's right there. Or well, she did run away when I was pointing at her for some reason, but yeah, it's fun that you will have been able to see the spiders all in the background. Anyways, I think that's it for the stream, so thank you so much for watching, and have a great day and a great weekend or a great night or whatever time it is for you.